Hey everyone, what is up? Welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry. Today we'll be recording the 42nd episode of this Let's Play and the 5th episode of Chapter 5. Last episode was a really big one, and I honestly don't even know where we go from here. The last episode we had some crazy stuff. We went straight from Shion's punishment into Satoshi being missing and, like, Shion's conversation with Oishi, right? Regarding this to kind of get some theories, and then Shion's starting to form these theories that like in the case of any that have an identified killer, right? It's that got demoned away. Maybe the killing wasn't of their own will, and which is something I kind of already agreed with. And the main suspect for me, suddenly, who is Takano, just shows up behind her after that. They start to exchange notes, so we might get to see her notebook, Takano's notebook, see what she has in there. And then right after that, we see the scene of Shion and Mion in the apartment where Mion reveals that, first of all, she also like removed some of her fingernails because she felt bad, which is kind of interesting. Um, Maybe it explains why there potentially isn't some huge grudge. I don't know. And well, I don't know. It still seems to me in chapter 2 like there's a bit of a grudge. But anyways, the more notable part, I think, is when Mion says Satoshi's disappearance had nothing to do with the Sonozakis. Like, they didn't have him skip town. And this infuriates Shion. Like, seriously infuriates her. She started choking her, right? It seemed to me like she snapped, right? And she seemed like she was having a conversation in her own head. And I don't know, maybe this is one of those cases where I'm seeing the evidence I want to see, but it really seems like she's talking to something within her own head at certain points. And I've mentioned I think it could be a parasite that is causing this craziness, and especially it could make sense in Shion right now, right? Um, and I don't know, like, really, it seemed at points like she was talking to a demon in her, like a parasite, and like, you're not gonna take over. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, and I think that could be very important, right? So that's just four like crazy scenes that have a lot of story impact back to back to back to back. Like, what last episode was crazy. So for this episode, I'm not really sure what I'm looking to see. Right, I know we're looking to see Keiichi's eventual role in this chapter because I'm pretty sure he's going to have one. Maybe Takano's notes will be kind of enlightening. Maybe we'll learn a little more about Satoshi's disappearance. I don't know. It kind of seemed like the case on that goes cold, right? Like, that's what it seemed like in the question arcs, and it's kind of seeming based on some of the tips that there's not really more evidence that is found, right? Ugh. But I think those are maybe the main things I'm looking for right now. So let's just go ahead and see what this episode is going to contain for us, you know? I'm hoping it's going to be as good as the last one was. Let's go ahead and jump right into it.
淡くて儚い
Love that is lighted and
シャボン
fleeting
玉のよ
like
う
a
な
soap
恋
bubble.
心
If it seeks the sky, it will break
空
and
を
vanish
望め
before
ば
long. The
やが
girl's
て
thoughts
壊れ
weren't
て消える
granted.
ように少女の思いは虚しく叶わなかった
What in the world is that?
流
The
した
tears that
涙
were
は
shed changed to the color of
血の
blood
色
and
と
yearned
なっ
for
て生
sacrifice.
贄を求め
The sadness that pierced her
口
transformed
を
into
つい
rage
た
and
悲しみ
ultimately to
は
murderous intent.
怒りとなって殺意を生み出してゆく
Yeah, I mean, that checks out. Everything was absorbed
純
in pure
粋すぎ
black,
る
and the
黒は
darkness continued to
す
spread
べ
in
て
the
を
end,
飲み
even
込
to
んで
herself.
闇を広げるやがては自分自身さえも目明かし生まれてこなければよかったの
Would it
か
be better if I hadn't been
血みど
born?
ろの手は
This
虚空すら
bloodstained
つか
hand
めな
couldn't
かっ
even
た
grasp the air. A lot of these are so hard for me to fully grasp them. Okay, we're in 1983. A lot of these can be so difficult for me to grasp the meaning of, given how fleeting they are. Fourth year of the series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa, also known as Yashasama's Curse, 1 year after Satoshi Hojo's disappearance. To me, it kind of seemed like I mean, basically, it was just saying, like, I don't know, Shion's wish wasn't really fulfilled, that love was, like, fleeting, and her sorrow at things being taken away turns to murderous intent, which is interesting. Maybe this is about to be... Well, I was about to say maybe this is about to turn into, like, Chapter 2 now, but from Shion's perspective, and it's still possible. But, I mean, the thing is... I don't know, that's not necessarily true, because these events play out every time, right, in theory, right? So, any of Chapters 1 through 3 would happen. If they mention murderous intent, I'm going to assume 2, maybe even 3, right? Maybe even 3. But... Because I will say, if I had to choose a chapter that feels the most, like, tied in with this one thematically, we've dealt a lot with Satoshi. And when I think the chapters that have a lot to do with Satoshi, I don't think Chapter 2, first of all. I think Chapters 1 and 3. Chapter 3 obviously has a lot of elements of Satoko. And Satoko's been honestly, most of the normal crew, besides, like, Mion, has been a surprisingly minor role so far in this chapter, now that I think about it. Don't get me wrong, Satoko has had an important role, like, story-wise. She just didn't show up many times. Rika kind of just exists. I don't know. Rena, she had one big scene. Not a huge deal, it's just something I was kind of thinking about. Anyways, when I think, it's easy to draw comparisons with Keiichi's killing of Teppei with Satoshi's killing of his aunt, whose name I forgot. It was revealed, and I don't remember it. So that's kind of... Maybe, like, they're gonna go for that. Like, thematically, it would kind of make sense. Explaining Chapter 3 this quick would be kind of crazy to me. Which is why Chapter 1 maybe makes more sense. That's the one where I think Keiichi follows in the footsteps of Satoshi's disappearance, and, like, him kind of getting paranoid. I gotta wonder, like, did we miss Satoshi, like, when Shion was recovering from the fingernail thing? Did we miss Satoshi, like, getting really paranoid? And, like, because I think we must have, right? Before he disappeared. Which would be interesting, and maybe, like, that's the draw with Chapter 1. I don't know. A lot of talking before we really begin. Now that we're in 1983, I'm just really curious how this is all going to play out. I mean, it could just be a completely unique scenario, too, but I don't know. I mean, I'd kind of talked myself into I could see any of them, actually. Like, maybe not Chapter 2. Like, if they want to stick with Satoshi thematically, but if they want it to be Shion thematically, Chapter 2 makes sense, potentially. I don't know. Let's just go on. The easiest way to figure out the answer to those questions is to keep playing, because these aren't exactly, like, grand mysteries. Just things we haven't gotten to yet. I hadn't been able to get used to my new school in Okonomiya, but I had some friends there now. Since I got a part-time job at my relative's store, I had some extra pocket money, too. I ended up living with my parents after all, so I didn't have to pay for living expenses. It felt great to get to freely spend the money I earned from working. I still used the room Kasai set up for me from time to time. It was a convenient hideout for when I didn't want to see my parents. In fact, I was planning to spend a day there today.
ちくしょう、先行め。サボりのことを家に連絡しやがって。
My dad got upset, and that was why I didn't want to stay at home. I had been asking for it, though. My teacher should know that my dad is a Yakuza, and that he gets really scary when he's mad. On the whole, my life had been going well so far, except that it was boring. The reason I can enjoy this lifestyle is probably because I had to live in secret before. It was a great relief to be able to live without having to fake my identity. Well, that might have been a valuable experience. I think I learned from it. I was going grocery shopping and thought I'd get enough food for a week or so. My parents would appreciate my presence more after missing me for a week. I was doing this for their sakes.
あれ？今日って確か100円セールのお店ってなかったっけ？そうだそうだ、間違いない。
I knew how to save my pocket money. I was in a good mood. I spun around with my arms spread out. I felt like I was inside a little whirlwind. My arm hits a motorcycle parked on the sidewalk. It obviously wasn't where it was supposed to be.
何？こんなとこに止めてるの誰？
Shion, don't do this again. Do not do this again, please. Ain't no way. I gave the motorcycle a kick with no hesitation. There were 3 motorcycles lined up in a row. They all fell like dominoes. It was beautiful and so much fun. Oh, this was odd. I felt like I'd gone through the same exact experience before. While blinking my eyes in an effort to recall when that was, some people grabbed me by the neck and dragged me into a dark alley. It looked like these punks were the owners of those motorcycles. They started shouting at me. This really was strange. I was having deja vu. Isn't this the exact same dialogue, too? That's right. It was when I met Satoshi-kun for the first time. He came to save me. If I pretended to cry again now, would he come to save me again? I made a wish, and I started pretending to cry and beg for mercy. At that time, I doubted my ears. That's Keiichi. It was a boy about my age. I couldn't quite see his face because of the light illuminating him from behind.
Satoshi-kun?
Of course, it couldn't be him. It couldn't be. It's not, but... Holy moly. Keiichi sprites. I almost thought we'd never see the day, to be honest. Well, this is interesting, because already this is different than what we see in any of the first 3 chapters, right? I don't think this scene happened in any of them, although it is weird how apparently consistent it is that these guys get their motorcycles kicked down and they fall like dominoes. They need to just stop parking in this area, bro. But I don't know. To me, it really means it can't be chapter 2. Maybe it's something from 1 or 3 that Keiichi, like, we just never see from Keiichi's perspective. But in chapter 2, Keiichi does it and explicitly gets protected. So it wouldn't really make sense to me that it would happen twice that quickly. I don't know. I'm starting to think maybe it's just its own scenario, which would make sense. But we'll see. Again, we'll see. When I snapped out of my daydream, I realized that I wasn't Satoshi-kun after all. He looked less gracious than Satoshi-kun, so to speak. If Satoshi-kun was pristine and untouched, then this guy would have scratches all over him. But although they were completely different, I got a similar impression from him somehow. The boy looked a bit taken aback.
もう泣いてるんだから、それくらいで勘弁してあげてもいいんじゃないかななんて。あ？そんなことを命にされとんじゃおらか。うわー！タマ、暴力は良くないぜ。
I haven't seen Keiichi in so long. I forgot he's pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie. What was up with this guy? I felt ashamed that I mistook him for Satoshi-kun even for a second. He seemed cool at first, but he wasn't as cool as Satoshi-kun after all.
いや、だから、バイクが倒れたのはお気の毒と思いますよ。でもですね、どうか機嫌を直されてですね、どうしたら機嫌を直してくださるんですかね。いや、もちろん私たちはお金なんか持ってないんですがね。おお、そうじゃの。金がなかったら。金がのうならっしゃー。体で払ってもおっかないっちゃな。こんな、よう見ると結構イケてるもんな。
Oh, nah.
どうじゃこの後。
Hey, are you kidding me? I tightened my grip on the stun gun in my pocket, and I turned it up to the maximum intensity. Don't hold a grudge against me if you die, pervs.
おお、俺さ、一度カイコちゃんはべらせて街のべりたくてさ。おろじゃ。もっと着飾ってスカートもミニで。興奮さ。
You know, every time These guys always do deserve it. They somehow get more depraved. They indulge in their imaginations, which arouse their spirits. Hey now, why are you perverts closing in on me? Your gross hands are groping the air. Are you gonna try and violate me?
タイトミニもええのミニミニあっしゃ
Is Keiichi gonna do something?
上から下まで全部色っぽくしゃよ
No fairness, I don't really know what he would do here besides like step in, get beat up, and take the heat off of her or something. I don't know.
肌色の面積を限りなく広げて萌え萌えの姿にしちゃるけ
あんたら冗談でしょその汚い手で私に触れるな
Then a flash of light cut through the air. Was that the boy?
このボケなすどもが
Blows like thunderbolts knocked the punks down. Where did Keiichi learn this? Has he been taking some classes with Rena? Wow, so he actually was strong after all?
ああいてこまされたいんか
お前らは分かっていない分かっていない
何がじゃ
タイトミニには萌えがないそして肌色面積は控えめにたとえお天道様が西から登ることがあろうとも絶対絶対これは萌え業界の鉄則だ
Bro.
いいかよく聞けど素人ども
No, there's no way.
ホモ・サピエンスと動物の違いは何か
God. I forgot how goofy Keiichi is, man.
そう衣服の着用だつまり人は肌以外の衣服の彩りがあって初めて人なのだつまり肌色を求めすぎる貴様らは人以下動物と同じだ貴様ら全員を強制する顔食いしばれ
What is... Dude, I don't even know what to say. He's actually giving him the business.
先ほどタイトミニを引き合いに出したな例えばここに美少女と呼ぶにふさわしい女の子がいたとする美少女と一言に言ってもその裾野は広すぎるそれについて貴様らに抗議することは寿司山芸者から入った外国人に侍の美学を一から説明するより困難この上極まりないだからここでは最も普及していると思われる制服系で説明することとする
It's easy to forget how ridiculous this guy's, like, speeches can be when you haven't seen them in a while.
制服系の御三家といえば何か答えてみろそうだな制服体操服スクール水着だろうなおセーラーかブレザーかの好みの違いは制服にカテゴライズするものとする
Bro's got subdivisions.
もちろんブルマーかスパッツかの違いも同様スクミズも紺か白かの違いはあるぞカテゴリーは同じ扱いだどうだこれだけでも甘美な響きがするであろ
Bro.
うではお前ら3人がこれらのうちの一つずつが好みであったと仮定しよ
I cannot wait to see Shion's reaction to this.
うおい不良 A お前は制服だ不良 B お前は体操服そして不良 C はスクミズだ頭に思い描け時間は3秒描けたか妄想くらい自在にできろ気合が足りんやり直せ
This is... I cannot believe how long this is going on, but this totally fits Keiichi.
ではお前らの望む美少女がここにいてその衣装を着ているぞあると思えあると信じろ気合を入れろ返事はオスかさあイエスサーだ
What?
バカ者それでも軍人かよーし描けたようだな次に進むぞそれらの萌え衣装と貴様らの馬鹿げた欲情に従いお色気ムンムンなタイトミニスカート姿を見比べてみろ
Now think, if you take all their clothes off, that's not cosplay anymore, is it? You got a point. I guess.
最近まだ萌えと色気の違いのわからん未熟者が増えているが実に嘆かわしい
Bro has very strong opinions on this. Humans without clothes aren't civilized, they're animals.
本能でしか女性の魅力を語れない貴様らは犬猿キジだきびだんごでももらって鬼ヶ島へでも失せろ Get back here! ちなみに最近の東西雪解けに従い
Wait,
声もいろいろな類が
What?
大量に上陸しているな。
He told them to leave and then get back.
そんなことも知らんのか愚か者は。制服系と金髪を掛け合わせてアニメ系などという酸素と水素が掛け合わされて能登半島かわいいよ大爆発なんて組み合わせが出ているようだが、本館は断じて認めたりはしないぞ。
Bro has his sources.
制服は日本の文化だ、芸術だ。和洋折衷はこの世界には存在しない。貴様ら聞いているのか、軟弱するめどもが。歯を食いしばれ、今日は徹底的にしごく。
I cannot believe this is still going.
貴様らが真の萌え文化を理解できるまで今日は寝られないと思え。はい、指導指導指導。
At that point, I heard a bustle of people running this way.
前原さん、みんな呼んできました。
I saw several kids running towards us. It seemed like our backup had arrived.
やばいぞ、繋がれ。
The three punks had just been standing there agape, but they started running away when they saw that many people. Ah, classic
さすが前
Higurashi.
原さんですね。
Yeah, let Keiichi cook.
たった一人であんな怖そうな3人組を釘付けにしちゃうなんて。3人の1人鼻血出してましたね。前原さん、
Dude,
喧嘩も強いなんてすごいです。
I don't think that had
尊敬します。
I don't think that had anything to do with a punch.
俺の固有結界もますます磨きがかかったようだな。今に監督の固有結界メイドインヘブンに太刀打ちできるくらいに磨きをかけてやるぜ。と、そんなことはいいや。
Yeah? You think? You think you're gonna have a better reality marble?
大丈夫かよ、ミオン。
The boy was apparently called Maibara. He turned around to face me. Even the way he mistook me for Mion sounded like Satoshi-kun. But Satoshi-kun isn't a pervert like him.
天下ごめんのミオンがどんな情け容赦のない必殺技で撃退してみせるか。まあさすがに男が3人がかりじゃきつかったってことか。そんなわけないよな。
Laughing at her. I was still confused. I couldn't yet grasp the situation. Who was this guy? Mion has friends like him? I was still spacing out in shock, so I forgot to move until his hand touched my head. Oh, nah.
まあ半べそ書いてたのは見なかったことにするからさ。まあ元気出せよな。
Rub, rub. The boy called my bara stroked my head roughly. It didn't feel good. It hurt, actually. But still, his hand had the same warmth. Is that just it for her? You just rub her head after saving her? Boom. She's in love? Is that what's gonna happen here? Later on, Mion told me about him. He was called Keiichi Maibara. Keichan for short. He's one grade below us. Not only that, but he just moved to Hinamizawa. Thanks to his attitude and lack of manners, he'd already become an idol in their class. Mion joyously explained all of this. Sure, he sounded like a fun kid. I knew why Mion was into him, but Satoshi-kun is way cooler. He wasn't worth stealing from Sis. Or was he? My heart throbbed. I was excited. Felt like I'd gotten a new toy. I was curious as to what kind of relationship Mion intended to build with him. I'd love to tease her about it.
ありがとう、ケイちゃん。よかったらお礼にお茶でもおごるよ。すぐ近くにおじさんの店があるし、どう？
Satoshi-kun would refuse out of modesty. But Keiichi Maibara said okay, within 2 seconds. Well then, I couldn't wait to tease the two of them. My boring life suddenly became bright again.
おい、腕なんかにしがみつくなよ。
あれ？こういうの嫌いですか？
いや、嫌いじゃないけど、胸が当たって、
胸が当たって何ですって？
Evil. This is the Shion that, I remember from chapter 2, of course. Keiichi Maibara was fun. Mion thought the same way I did. She would always talk about him. I was happy for her. It made me smile.
お姉はケイちゃんのこと本当に気に入ってますね。ズバリケイちゃんの魅力を一言で示すと何です？ そうだね。もしも一言でしか言っちゃいけないなら、やっぱり面白いとこかな。
That is true.
そうそう、この間の部活の時にさ。
Mion really liked him, but didn't seem to think it was love yet. She's reserved in that area, so that was really like her. As for me, well, I didn't hate him. But my feelings weren't the same as Mion's. Okay, so... I mean, that's not a bad thing. I didn't know if that's where this was gonna go. Kei-chan was just too childish compared to Satoshi-kun. I mean, true. I wondered how Satoshi-kun was doing. Was he waiting for things to cool down somewhere far away? The case had already been solved, though. That dopehead was the murderer. There was no reason for him to wait anymore. I shook my head. I shouldn't think about it too much. But wait, I know. The case was confidential, so the arrest of the culprit hasn't been made public. So Satoshi-kun hadn't realized that he could come back. I know he's a little thick-headed. Maybe he'd be waiting for things to calm down until the end of time. But if so, couldn't he give a call to Satoko at least? He should tell her he's living in a faraway place, or that he'd be coming home soon. Ah, that stupid Satoko. She'd been living with Rika Furude since Satoshi-kun went away, so nobody would pick up the phone even if he called. Stupid girl. Don't you want your big brother to come home? Given Satoshi-kun's personality, he wouldn't remember any phone numbers other than his home number. So he wouldn't be able to contact anybody in Hinamizawa. Maybe he's been calling Satoko every night. He keeps ringing, but nobody picks up. And he'd assume Satoko might be taking a bath or be in the restroom. He'd put on a puzzled smile while mumbling, like always.
Moo.
Moo. I imitated his voice without realizing it.
それで。え、何？何？今、シオン、何か言わなかった？
I laughed it off and urged Mion to continue. I realized then that her tone had changed. I hadn't been listening to her because I was thinking about Satoshi-kun. I thought she was still happily talking about Kei-chan. But Mion sounded grim now. Her faint smile looked pitiful. It was too late to ask what was going on. So instead I concentrated on her story instead.
でね、おじさんが今日は盛り上げてくれてありがとうって言って、売り物のお人形をみんなに一個ずつ配ったの。
It is chapter 2.
私以外の全員に。お姉以外の全員にね。そりゃあ私も欲しかったけどさ、みんなの手前、私にもちょうだいとは言い出せなかったし。
Interesting. So is this actually going to be chapter 2? And we just didn't see that scene? Wow, okay.
相変わらずお姉は自分の欲しいものを欲しいと言えない人ですね。
We just didn't see the scene that we just saw from Keiichi's perspective.
それで
Mion sniffled. I realized that she was on the verge of tears.
ケイちゃんの袋にはね、一番可愛いお人形が入ってて、そのお人形が一番欲しかったってわけ？別に何のお人形だってよかったんだよ。ケイちゃんは私だけもらってないって知ってたのに、私にくれなかった。私にくれなかった。ミオンには似合わないよなって言って、次に生まれてくるときは
Yeah.
言われたんだよ。
That was Keiichi's weak point. He might be fun and popular, but he wasn't mature. Not like Satoshi-kun. Okay, you really didn't have to. I know this is just how you are, but you really didn't have to bring him into this.
やり直したい。ケイちゃんに出会った最初の頃からやり直して、今度はちゃんと女の子だと思ってもらえるように。おねえ、深刻すぎですって。お姉がやり直したいと思って、しかも向こうが何もトラブってない状態なら全然セーフじゃないですか。互いに傷つき合ってただれちゃうと、まあやり直しも面倒でしょうが。やり直せるかな。ケイちゃんの前で涙を流してないなら、そもそも何も手遅れじゃないんです。お姉がこの場で適当に涙して、明日から心を入れ替えていけば修正可能ですって。そりゃケイちゃんのデリカシーのなさには呆れますけど、その結果は結局今日までのお姉の積み重ねてきた結果なわけですから。今日からの生活を少しずつ改めてポイントを稼ぎ直せばいいだけのことです。
Something like that.
生活を改めるってどうやって？
お姉に可愛らしくしろって言うと、明日からフリフリの格好で登校しかねませんからね。変に構えないで普段通りに行きましょう。でも細かい部分でこれまでの違いを見せていく。そこがさりげないポイント。あと人形をもらったレナという子には釘を刺しておくこと。現在のケイちゃんの中ではお姉よりもレナの方が高ポイントの可能性が高いです。
Wise observation.
確かにレナは女の子っぽいしな。可愛いし海外しいし。
ライバルがいるならうかうかできませんよお姉。涙は男を引き寄せる力がありますけど、つなぎ止めておく力はありません。普段は笑っててポイントで泣く。萌えの典型パターンの一つかもです。私もケイちゃんに実践してみるかな。
Oh, don't say that.
ダメだよ。
That's evil. That was
お
evil.
姉が気に入る男の子ですからね。私が気に入らない道理はありませんから。さーて、ケイちゃんをどう引き込んでみせようかな。なんならお姉、どっちがケイちゃんの気を引けるか競争しましょうか。
Shion, you are evil.
やだもう絶対やだ。シオン、ひなみ沢に来たら追い返す。
Straight into orbit. I'm happy for you, sis. It's not too late at all. It's important to know the distance between the boy you love and yourself, and shift the way you appeal to him to compensate. The boy I love is missing, you know? I don't even know where he is, or when he's coming back. Compared to that, you're very lucky. Mion was saying she'd do her best from tomorrow on with red, tearful eyes, but I sensed a deeply negative feeling emerging inside me. Nobody was blaming Mion for being happy with Keiichi. I wasn't envious. I wasn't jealous. I didn't want her to be blamed the same way I was blamed. It was just that there was no space for Satoshi-kun in Mion's mind anymore, filled as it was with Kei-chan and her other friends now. It didn't matter to her if Satoshi-kun came back, or not. Just like how she didn't care if it was sunny or rainy tomorrow. What about me then? Had I been thinking about Satoshi-kun all the time for the past year? I wasn't proud of my own answer. I'd become used to life without Satoshi-kun. His absence didn't hurt me anymore. I was getting used to life with Keiichi Maibara. And if I let my guard down, he might just fill up the space I'd been saving for Satoshi-kun. If Shion Sonozaki had prayed harder for Satoshi-kun to return, he might have come home already. Where did Satoshi-kun go? Last year, right after his disappearance, I paid close attention to the information circulating in the Sonozaki family and its underground connections. And I frequently went to the police station to check with Oishi for new information. Even with all that, I couldn't get any new leads on his whereabouts. I eventually became interested in Ayashi Rosama's curse, which surrounded Satoshi-kun's disappearance. I researched the dark history of the village. The more I looked into it, the less likely his survival seemed. I'd returned Mio-san's scrapbooks to her, and then I hadn't gone to the library since. I started a new life in a new school. I'd made new friends, and in the same way, as falling leaves covered the ground, I felt like I was losing sight of what was really important to me. It was already almost the end of spring. They said that summer was coming early, and it'd be very hot this year. Normally it'd be the raining season now, but we'd had no rain at all. The Watanagashi festival was right around the corner. It's been almost a year since Satoshi-kun went missing. In Hinamizawa, they don't allow you to talk openly about Yashiro-sama's curse, or the series of mysterious deaths. So everybody acts like the murder of Satoshi-kun's aunt never happened. That's because Satoshi Hojo-kun was a member of the family of traitors. He fell victim to Yashiro-sama's curse in the 4th year running. He was demoned away. Everybody was trying to forget about his existence and erase their memories of him. Don't make him disappear because of the curse. Don't erase his existence. Satoshi-kun was living in Hinamizawa just a year ago. He went to school. He was an A student. He was a member of the Hinamizawa Fighters. He could never hit the ball when it really mattered. He was unreliable, but pure. He was warm. Because of the curse, people made him disappear. They stopped mentioning his name, and acted like he never existed. A new resident like Keiichi Maibara wouldn't even know him. At this point, that is true, actually. He seriously believed that Satoshi-kun had transferred out. I miss you, Satoshi-kun. I want to go shopping with you again. I want to be in a baseball game with you again, and get a cold drink afterwards. I want to tease you. I want you to stroke my head again. Your hand was so warm. I felt as if my whole body was being caressed. Satoshi-kun. I haven't opened this notebook in a while. My feelings have been written down for over 150 pages. This notebook is the key to my heart. The other me who's been sleeping since last year is slowly waking up. Okay, so I'm assuming that means the demon inside of her, which again isn't really shocking and could definitely indicate chapter 2 to me. Like, it feels like, I mean, if this isn't chapter 2, that would be insanity at this point.
ケイチさんのドスケベぶりには呆れましたよ。
Where have we skipped to now?
男の子なら仕方がないのですよ。みーちゃんもしーちゃんもケイチくん困ってるよ。
Are we at the party after the baseball game?
ですってよ、お姉。大岡越前じゃあるまいし、このままケイちゃんが引きちぎれるまで引っ張りっこします。
I could see this being that party because Shion has a scene where she, like, ooh, she starts to lose it. I wonder if that's what really starts to, like... They mentioned that the demon was being awakened. I wonder if that, like, really progresses things.
引っ張りっこなんかしてないよ。シオンが引っ張らなければ済むことでしょ。シオンは沖宮に帰れ。はい、了解。そうしますね。パッと。
I let go of Keiichi suddenly, so he and Sis flew off like a rubber band. Keiichi rolled on the ground while Sis was stuck in a bush head first. What lively people.
じゃあケイちゃん、これ以上からかうとお姉に噛みつかれかねないので、今日はこれで帰りますね。
Might kick you into orbit.
あ、シオン、そのさ、今日はありがとな。
ああ、あんなのお安いご用です。あの程度で恩が着せられるならいくらでもってくらい。
じゃあまたな、シオン。
His hand landed on my head. Rub, rub, rub. He stroked my head pretty roughly, but the warmth reminded me.
ああ、じゃあすみませんね。今日は失礼します。またね、お姉。二度と来るなー。レナは紹介。サトコはトラ。リカちゃんは塩巻いて。
Purify it with salt. That's real. The warmth remained on the top of my head. It felt ticklish and sore. I had to stop. I got off my moped and pushed that aching spot against a telephone pole. I'm sorry, Satoshi-kun. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I never forgot about you. I still remember you. I'm worthless without you. I can't stand life without you because it's gray and cold and boring. It's true. I can never smile because you aren't here. I can't.
じゃあまたな、シオン。
Keiichi's face appeared in my mind. I recalled the touch of his hand stroking my head. It wasn't warm. I wasn't happy. It was rough and painful. I hate that insensitive guy. He's too childish, rude, and cold. He's like a stray dog. I wasn't happy. It wasn't warm. I wasn't happy or overjoyed at all.
嘘だー。サトシ。
Yeah, okay, so this is hard to see. Like, she's really... Ugh. Yikes. I mean, she made it seem like she was getting over it, but she's really not. And I think the fact that, like, she seems to be warming up to Keiichi, it's really making her feel extremely guilty. Satoshi-kun mumbled. He didn't know what to say in a situation like this, but he knew that he had better say something. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say, so he just mumbled. I'm sorry, Shion. Why are you apologizing, Satoshi-kun? I'm the one who should apologize. Even though I said I'd wait for you, even though I believed my heart wouldn't change, my heart is full of holes. You're leaking out from the small cracks in my heart, little by little. You're leaking out from me. Are you suffering because I'm here? Why? You're so precious to me, so don't say that. I've been here with you all this time, but I think I'm hurting you by continuing to exist. I don't want that. It's not true. No. Where have you been, Satoshi-kun? You weren't with me. Tell me where you are. What's the address? What's the postal code? What's the name of the city? What's the street number? Tell me. There isn't an address. I knew it. Telling me you've always been with me, always by my side. That's such a cliche. Which do you prefer, Shion? I can give you strength, I'll stay by your side forever. But if you're suffering because of me, I'll disappear right away.
そんなこと、一緒がいい。一緒がいいよ。サトシ君と。いつまでも一緒がいい。
Jeez, this inner monologue is hard. I mean, I'm not sure I really believe that's Satoshi she's talking with, but... Okay. I'll stay with you then. A car passed by. The noise snapped me out of my reverie. The sky was turning orange. I should get home before it gets cold. I should go home to Okonomiya. You're with me, right? Are you with me right now, Satoshi-kun? I walked back to my moped. My feet sank into the grass. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I stopped when I reached my bike, but then I heard an extra footstep. I gasped. I could feel somebody else's presence. I'm not stupid. Nobody else was around here. Nobody had suddenly appeared behind me. So I wasn't surprised to find nobody when I turned around. But he was definitely still there.
サトシ君。
Interesting. So she's starting to hear the footsteps already. So even assuming this is chapter 2, like, and it perfectly lines up with things. I mean, at this point, this almost certainly can't. Wait. I'm so dumb. The baseball game wasn't even in chapter 2. That's why, no, so that didn't happen. So, was this... I maybe remember this. Okay, I was waiting for her to meet up with Keiichi this whole time. I don't think that happens. Okay. I might have to find the scene that this was, because I'm not sure if this is a scene that we saw. But either way, point is, this is interesting, because... My whole theory with the time, right, like with of things getting really bad, it just seems to be completely off, right? I don't know. We're just gonna actually keep going for now. We're in the middle of a scene. I couldn't see him, but he was there. He was there for me. Satoshi-kun never lies. He said he'd be with me all the time. I'd just been too insensitive to feel his existence until now.
サトシ君。サトシ君。
A breeze tickled my hair. It felt cold, but to me it was nothing but the warmth of his hand. It took me a while to notice that my cheeks were wet with tears. Okay, yeah, see, we're right there. Might as well wait. I think that's going to be the chapter transition, probably. Nope, not quite. Okay, so... Oh, Lord, here we go. Yeah, symptoms are starting. Yeah, so that's what's interesting is, if this is a mirror of Chapter 2, then I would have assumed they would have began on the night of Watanagashi, right? Because that was only the first time we heard symptoms reported, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it was the first time, right? Wait, could this have been the day she talked to Takano? Was that the same day? I mean, they were in the right location. If so, I guess maybe the theory could maybe still sort of line up. I just definitely had some things wrong. But the point is, either way, it seems like she had those symptoms before the shed, and that was just the first time we had them indicated to us, which makes sense now that I think about it. Right, just because it was the first time Keiichi knew about them doesn't mean it was the first time they happened. I was too scared to sleep. If I went to sleep, I might not find Satoshi-kun there in the morning. So I kept talking to him until I passed out. I told him about what happened while he was missing. I told him that I realized how much I loved him after he went away. I'd searched for him, looking into various different things. I'd gathered underground information through Kasai, and bargained for police information with Oishi, but I couldn't find any leads. A long time passed, but I kept thinking about him. Etc., etc. I told him all the small details from my daily life, the places I wanted to go with him, the things I wanted to do with him, the food I wanted to share with him, and I told him a lot of things. I was sitting up at first, but I got tired, so I laid down. I got tired of moving my mouth too, so I started talking to him in my mind. It was the happiest night I'd ever had. Interesting. When I woke up, I didn't find Satoshi-kun by my side. I knew it somehow. I was afraid of it. That was why I didn't want to go to sleep. But at least I got to see him for one night. Just when I'd resigned myself to that, I felt Satoshi-kun's presence again. It wasn't a dream after all. I thanked God. And so I began my strange life with Satoshi-kun. As promised, Satoshi-kun was always by my side. He couldn't laugh, mumble, or stroke my head. He was always with me. Always right by my side. He disappeared sometimes, but he'd come back when I looked for him. It seemed that all I could hear was his footsteps. That's just the way it was. It was a bit sad, but I was still satisfied. His presence was really faint, so it was hard to sense him in a crowd, but he never left me. If he were tangible, I'd be taking his hand all the time so that he wouldn't be lost. In contrast, I could feel him very strongly in a quiet environment. Of course, I couldn't tell what his expressions were, because he was just a presence. But after I got used to it, I could tell what he was thinking. At first, I could only tell if he was laughing or not. Eventually, I started to feel his emotions more strongly. I could communicate with him normally. I was usually alone with him, though. I didn't want to go to school or hang out with my friends anymore, but Satoshi-kun got upset about that. He'd keep mumbling unhappily. Now that I knew he'd always be with me, I shouldn't just stay home all the time. I was sticking to my time alone with him, however, because I was scared that he might suddenly disappear again, and I wanted to make the most of the time I was sharing with him right now. I must have been worrying too excessively. Satoshi-kun will always be by my side. Yeah, that was his promise. He never breaks his promises. I was fine, because he was there. Of course, I couldn't tell anybody about him, not even Sis. I could try to explain it to them, but they'd never understand. But I was certain that he was with me. So, I'd be alright. I never get fed up with life with him. He's really cute, you know? We always walk together, but when I stop, he always walks one extra step. That's so adorable. I love it. Okay, I mean, so we're getting the same thing that we've seen many times now with the footsteps.
シオンさんはどうなさいますか?
Except she's viewing this as like Satoshi's spirit. Again, so this is one of those things, it's really up to how you interpret it, right? And maybe like, I don't know how to say this, like, I don't know, it can kind of be what you need it, like, or what, like, whatever you think it is, like, is what it will be for you, right? Like, Shion thinks it's Satoshi's, like being there as, like, as a kind of a spirit, almost, right? And his presence is there. Right. Keiichi, in chapter 1, he viewed it as like something was following him, and like it was eventually like it was like kind of like Oyashiro-sama, right? And I mean, that's just 2 examples, right? I don't think there's a ton more that we know how it's interpreted. But it's interesting nonetheless that they interpret it very differently. I guess Rena kind of interprets it differently as well, because, I mean, she said she heard the footsteps before, and she just always felt like it was a Yashiro-sama, right? Like, interesting. And she kind of gave that explanation to Keiichi in chapter 1, and that's when he felt that way. So maybe that's why Keiichi, you know, felt that way. That's what he was, like, kind of told to believe. It's interesting. So then what is it actually, is the question, of course.
今夜の綿流しのお祭りは
行って適当に遊ぶつもりです。お姉とその愉快な仲間たちでもからかうかな。
I wanted to go to the festival with Satoshi-kun. I knew he'd like to see me having fun with everybody. He might get jealous if I play with Kei-chan, but Satoshi-kun isn't very sensitive in that way. Satoshi-kun loved to see me and my friends have fun, so I should have a lot of fun for his sake. Then I'd talk about the day with him later.
何でひなみ沢に行きますか？車で行くならお送りしますよ。
スクーターで行くからいいや。
それはいけません。帰りに本家に寄られて、親類の宴会に加わられるんでしょ？居眠り運転などさせられません。
He won't let me drive, but he's kind enough to let me drink.
じゃ、お世話になりますかね。
わかりました。では、夕方に出発しましょう。そのくらいの頃にお迎えに参ります。
So we finally... I think soon we're gonna finally get the answer. I think we're gonna get it this episode. Oh, man. We're gonna finally get the answer on if I was right about this being Shion. Please. Please let me be right about that. Because that was another one. That was like a big one, right? Like... When is Watanagashi? Is it like tonight in game? Or is it the next day? I don't know. Whatever. We'll see. After Kasai left, I sensed that Satoshi-kun was excited about going to the festival.
綿流しか。サトシ君がいなくなっちゃってから、もうすぐ1年になるんだね。
Satoshi-kun seemed confused.
でしょ？
We laughed together. Jeez. Yeah, Shion's in a bad way.
いらっしゃい。はいよ、網とお椀。
We're getting straight into this.
よし、やる。金魚はみんな生きがいいね。実に美味しそう。この小さいのなんか、そのままボリボリと生でいけちゃうよね。
Huh?
ミオンさんは何を言ってるんでございますの？
This one was a classic.
みーちゃん、食べてたの？
I remember this one in the moment.
去年、レナからもらったのも食べちゃったの？
違う。私そんなこと言ってない。
Sis shook her head hard. She turned all red.
いや、でも、今、ミオン、お前自分で言ったぞ。実に美味しそうだって。
確かに言いました。お姉って雑食ですから、口に入れば何でも食べちゃうんです。
美味しいなら、今度僕も試してみるのです。ダメだよ、リカちゃん。お腹壊しちゃうよ。
ちょっと待て。おい、こら。お前、いつの間にいるんだよ。シオン。
はーい。ケイちゃんにお姉にみんな。
I don't know why the way she says hi is so funny.
こんばんは。あんた、どこから湧いてきたの、シオン。焼きそば屋さんの時からずっとです。お姉たちは騒がしいからすぐに見つけられました。もう、あんたは関係ないでしょ。早くどっか行きなさいよ。もう、お姉もあまり私を邪険にしないでください。ね、ケイちゃん、私が一緒でもいいですよね。
I took Kei-chan's arm and held it between my breasts. Hey, yo, puff puff. We were going to have a ball. And she gets slumped. I went around the booths with Sis and her friends. I joked around and laughed out loud. I teased Kei-chan and Sis too. Kei-chan was at the center of the group, so if I did something to him, it naturally involved everybody else. It looked like Satoshi-kun was having a hard time finding his own spot in the crowd. When I glanced at him in a quiet moment, he smiled and told me to have fun without worrying about him. If he were tangible, I'd pull his arm to join the crowd. It made me sad that I couldn't do that. Okay. I bumped into somebody's shoulder. It was obviously my fault, so I apologized right away. As it turned out, it was somebody I knew.
あら、
Oh, Lord.
楽しんでるみたいね。こんばんは、シオンちゃん。月の綺麗な晩ね。
あれ、すごいお久しぶりですね、高野さん。それから。
そうだね。挨拶をするのはこれが初めてだね。僕は富武。ミオンちゃんの双子の妹さんだって話は聞いてるよ。
よろしくです、富武さん。凄腕のカメラマンとのお噂だとか。ぜひ今度私も映してくださいね。
デビューを夢見て投稿を繰り返す素人だけどね。
そんなことないわよ。二郎さんは上手よ。いろいろとね。
So, what's the alternate meaning here?
いやいや、まだまだ勉強が足りないよ。才能に恵まれない分を努力で補わないとね。
They must have been in a relationship.
高野さんと富武さん、仲がよろしいようで。
Some kind of relationship. I don't know what their deal is still.
私はお邪魔ですかね。
あらあら、ご検察痛み入るけど、お気遣いは結構よ。それに高野なんて、なんだか他人行儀みたいな呼び方ね。昔みたいに、ミヨって呼んでくれていいのに。
やっぱり目上の人にファーストネーム呼びつけはちょっと気になるものでして。まあ気にしないでください。
I smiled bashfully, and Takano-san smiled back elegantly.
あれから図書館には来ないのね。研究の同志として、もっともっといろいろお話ししたかったのに。
まあ気が向いたらそのうちってことで。
研究の同志って、まさかシオンちゃんも興味があるのかい？
She was very interested in it, but I don't know how much she's, sounds like she hasn't really gotten involved much in that in a while.
その、この村の昔話とかに。
Tomitake-san raised his eyebrows. As far as I knew, Takano-san's hobby wasn't exactly normal. On the surface, her research dealt with the cultural history of ancient Hinamizawa, but its main focus was the Watanagashi festival from ancient times, the cannibal banquet in which they captured and gutted a living sacrifice. Her research covered various stories surrounding that and other legends of cruelty. It was nothing if not gory. That was where her main interests lay, so I didn't feel comfortable being called a fellow researcher, to be honest. But objectively speaking, her research notes were fun to read. It was then that I heard the loud booms of the taiko drums. The main event of the Watanagashi festival, the dedication dance, was about to start. According to Takano-san's hypothesis, the part of the dance where the shrine maiden tears open a futon mat represents gutting a living victim.
いよいよ始まりますね。そろそろ私も行くかな。高野さんたちも見に行くんですよね。
うん。
Tomitake-san looked bewildered. Did that mean he wasn't coming? Takano-san giggled and whispered in my ear.
実はね、これから西宮殿の中に入ってみようと思うの。
え？
She made it sound like she was going to do something fun, but it wouldn't be amusing to anyone who knew what the ritual storehouse was. The ritual storehouse, or the storehouse for ritual implements, is sort of a treasure house belonging to the Furude shrine. I'd heard that Oyashiro-sama's sacred treasures were stored in there. Only people from the Furude family and selected members of the other 2-3 families are allowed to enter. They believe that if other people enter, the place will be desecrated. Everybody in Hinamizawa must have been curious about what was in there when they were kids. But the storehouse was always tightly locked. You couldn't just peek into it either. Kids would get chided if they played around it, so they'd learn to stay away. I didn't like being around it myself since I was familiar with all that. Even though I didn't believe in curses, I still didn't want to be near it. Nothing good can come from breaking the rules. Were they still going to enter the ritual storehouse despite all that?
でも確かものすごい厳重な鍵がかかってたと思いましたよ。
去年まではね。前の缶抜きじゃ重すぎて大変だとリカちゃんが言ったらしいの。それで今年からものすごく安っぽい南京錠に変わったの。知ってた？
So maybe that's where she got that information for the sake of the phone call. Interesting.
いえ、知りません。
Like the phone calls where she mentioned that being part of the reason that maybe Rika died.
でも安っぽいと言ったって錠前がかかってますよ。
二郎さんね、とても器用なの。
ピッキングですか？
綿流しの儀式が始まれば全員が儀式に集まるでしょ。西宮殿の周りには人影は全くなくなる。今夜が一番の資格なの。東大元暮らしとでも言うのかしらね。
According to her hypothesis, the ancient tools used for human dissection and torture would be found in the ritual storehouse.
よかったら後でこっそりいらっしゃいな。二度とないチャンスよ。じゃあよかったら後でね。
高野さん、何の内緒話だい？
女同士の内緒話よ。行きましょう。 暗くて人気のないところへ合いびきに。
Hey, yo.
ん
Bro's just rolling with it. Takano-san walked against the flow of the crowd alongside Tomitake-san. The ritual storehouse, huh? It was supposedly filled with torture tools. Considering what they had in the underground torture room at the Sonozaki house, it's quite possible. Satoshi-kun fell victim to the curse in the 4th year. His aunt's death was the sign of Oyashiro-sama's curse. Satoshi-kun was the sacrifice to pacify Oyashiro-sama's anger. That was what Takano-san said last year. It was just her hypothesis. At present, I wanted to deny her hypothesis because I wanted to believe that Satoshi-kun was still alive. If her hypothesis was correct, either some religious fanatic or somebody from the 3 families must be imitating the curse in order to revive the ancient custom of Onikafuchi. That would mean that it was them who killed Satoshi-kun. So what if the ritual storehouse was filled with garbage instead of torture implements? Maybe it was filled with broken palanquins or freshly painted signboards for the festival. What then? It wasn't really hard for me to believe that it was filled with the chemical smell of paint. Maybe I'll get to deny the hypothesis that Satoshi-kun was sacrificed by seeing the inside of the ritual storehouse for myself. Whatever was in there, it didn't mean that Satoshi-kun would come back.
サトシ君、どうしよう。
Since most people went to see Rikachama's ritual dance, the festival grounds were deadly quiet. Even so, I couldn't sense Satoshi-kun. Did he go somewhere? Or was I not paying enough attention? Or maybe he wasn't feeling any emotions in particular. After thinking for a while, I decided to go in with them. It had been almost a year since Satoshi-kun's disappearance. I'd been avoiding the truth because I was afraid he might be dead. But now I had a chance. I had a chance to see the inside of the ritual storehouse. I felt as though something divine had arranged that coincidence. On my way to the storehouse, I noticed Keiichi. He was jumping up and down, trying to see Rikachama's dedication dance over people's shoulders. If I took him along, we could split the guilt. That's an insane sentence, by the way. We could split the guilt. That's the reason she brought him. That's insane. I'm gonna be real with you. Oyashiro-sama might put a curse on me for entering his divine storehouse. I wanted a partner in crime. Dude, this is insane. You're kind of wrong for this, I'm not gonna lie. Since the boy I love disappeared last year because of the curse, maybe Mion's love should disappear this year. Yo! So that's kind of evil. That's kind of evil.
何考えてんだ私。
I wonder if that has anything to do with I mean, like, it's not crazy to think that it's some kind of jealousy, but maybe, like, it's just partially jealousy that Keiichi lives Watanagashi that really kicks things off. Right? That it was another victim. That must have been the demon inside me. I shook the thought out of my head.
どうしたんだよ、シオン。それより、奉納演舞がよく見えるとこって、まだ遠いのか？
え？奉納演舞がよく見えるなんて誰が言いました？
We made it to the ritual storehouse. Keiichi was baffled by the whole situation. Our timing had been perfect. I could see Tomitake-san picking the lock. Okay. We're gonna see what goes on in here. Even though Keiichi must have been curious, he insisted that we shouldn't go in, but I talked him into it anyways. He was quick to change his mind when Tomitake-san joined in. It was completely dark inside, so Takano-san lit a battery-powered lantern. A small entry space appeared before us.
真っ暗だね。みんな転ばないように気をつけるんだよ。
ご心配ありがとう。
I'm really curious as to what happens in here.
じゃあ門番をよろしくね。
This is, like, everything from here on out, we're gonna start getting answers for Chapter 2, and that is interesting. Oh, man, I feel like I already made most of my theories, but if there's any changes for my Chapter 2 theories, I'm probably gonna have to do them, like, possibly before I end this episode, even. Right? Like, if I want to switch up on... No, there's no way. It was 100% Shion running around. Right? There's no way. The question is still, who was, like, the Sonozaki at the end, right? Because it was... We can account for everyone, like, up until we see them both again. And then it's like... which Sonozaki stabbed Keiichi, right? Which one was dead at the apartment? Do my answers to these change? Because my answer right now is I think Shion might have died on the night of the escape. And that Mion kind of took her place, but I don't know. Because my logic though was this, like, the days theory, but like I think that's already shattered. Maybe it was just Shion, right? The whole days theory logic, like specifically days before the curse takes you and it being so specific, I don't think it's right? And that was part of the reason I made that theory. So maybe that actual one last switch is not true, right? I don't know. For now, I'm going to say it's not. We'll see if I switch up and just go back to my old explanation. But now we're at the point where we're going to start to get some answers, like for real. Like some real answers. So let's get going.
ここ閉めるわよ。
Takano-san closed the door with a smile, as if leaving Tomatake-san out on purpose.
やれやれ。じゃあみんな、ゆっくり楽しんでおいで。
As soon as the heavy door was closed, we were surrounded by a quiet darkness. All we could rely on was Takano-san's lantern.
大丈夫よ。予備電池も入ってるアウトドア仕様なんだから。
I do want to say that if the day that Shion started to hear the footsteps was actually the day that she encountered Takano. No, sorry, it was 100%. No, again, no, it was not. Okay, let me regather my thoughts. If the day that she started hearing the footsteps was the same day in Chapter 2 of the Watanagashi setup, right, maybe there is something to the idea of, still to the idea of the 6-day thing, right? Not quite as I thought it was before, right? I don't know. Like, there's clearly something wrong with the theory, because it kind of can't be 3 and 3. Shion's already hearing things, right? It's like not possible for it to be 3 and 3, right? Okay, I don't want to spend too much time thinking, but I really want to work this out, like, a little bit in my head. Like 3 and 3, like 3 days, and when I say 3 and 3, to be clear, I've mentioned this before, but we're just going to clarify it now. I mean, like, 3 days where you're kind of building up symptoms, and then after 3 days, you start to really get, like, the footsteps, and the, like, you get ill, and that's when things start to get really bad, right? And 3 days after that is, in theory, when you die. And so that doesn't seem completely correct to me. Although, again, like I was saying, if the day that she heard the footsteps was the day she met with Takano on the Watanagashi setup, maybe I just have the footsteps day wrong, right? And the getting really sick, and I don't know, but she even had the insomnia that's kind of associated with it, right? Maybe the last 3 days is just when it starts to really overwhelm you if you've had it for that long. So it could still maybe work out. I still don't really know how you explain. Well, no, I guess by that logic, the footsteps that were heard by Sachi before aren't as weird, but it still wasn't 6 days before his disappearance, so I don't think. I don't know. I think that, like, I think that theory is just cooked, to be honest. I think, like, I don't know what to make of that theory, so we're actually just going to move on, right? And just assume that there's not much to that theory at this point. I don't think it's completely impossible that there's stuff to it, and I just don't want to sit there and think through all the details right now.
消えたりなんかしないわよ。
Takano-san teased Keiichi a little. Keiichi, in turn, looked a little pale. He seemed to be able to recognize the sanctity of the building even though he wasn't from Hinamizawa.
さ、よいしょっと。
After Takano-san opened the heavy inner door, a dusty, foul smell flowed out. It was like the smell of a pantry that hadn't been opened in years and the smell of a fish market mixed together. I didn't know exactly how to describe it, but it was a bad smell. From listening to the echo of our footsteps, I could tell that this room was much bigger than the one we were just in. When Takano-san raised her lantern, I could clearly see just how big it was. Didn't she mention seeing, like, skeletons in the cages? I'm really interested to see if we get to, like, see what that looks like. At the far side of the wall, there was a statue of some kind of god staring down at us intruders. The way it was lit by the lantern gave it a powerful appearance, and it scared me.
あれがひなみ沢の守り神、お社様よ。
I looked up at the statue, which was holding its religious ornaments. If Satoshi-kun's disappearance really was a curse, I couldn't forgive this god. I found myself irritated by the way the statue looked down at me. Damn you, O Yashiro-sama. If you really made Satoshi-kun disappear, I'll never forgive you. Never. Keiichi didn't seem to understand the significance of the storehouse. He looked bored. Takano-san noticed that and took out one of her scrapbooks to show him the brutal history of ancient Hinamizawa. Took out her scrapbooks, not one of them. I'd heard that story already, so I decided to walk around by myself. Since I knew the significance of all these tools, I felt a little nauseated. Though they certainly wouldn't jump out to me, I still found them intimidating. They looked as if they were craving for fresh blood after not having been used in hundreds of years. All the tools looked similar to the ones I saw in the underground torture room at the Sonozaki main house. Those tools were the progenies of torture implements. These would be their ancestors. All the implements here looked old. I doubted they could really be used. They weren't kept maintained like the ones at the Sonozaki house. So did that mean they shouldn't scare me? No, on the contrary. They told me that cruel rituals were indeed performed in this village at one point. Now that I found scary. What Takano-san told me was the truth. When I stopped, Satoshi-kun also stopped behind me, one step later. I felt no emotional change in Satoshi-kun. I couldn't tell if he was feeling something or not. I knew he was there, but I had no idea how he was feeling. I felt scared of him for the first time. If he could answer me, I'd want to ask him, who demoned you away?
ね、サトシ君、聞いてる？
I couldn't tell if he heard me or not. He left, as if he didn't hear anything. I had a thought that I can't believe I didn't even think about this. Are the footsteps necessarily a symptom? That might sound a little ridiculous. It might be something that only people who are somewhat afflicted can hear. But it doesn't seem like it's something individual, right? Tomitake hears the same things that Shion hears. I can't believe I never thought about this, because in my mind it was something like fabricated within your head, right? Like a hallucination, right? But if that was the case, why would they be hearing the same thing? Why would they not be hearing different hallucinations? How are they synchronized? Now that's interesting. That is, ooh. That throws a wrench in things. Are the footsteps not even they might not be hallucinations, right? Is this I don't know, is this some real spirit? I remember having the idea at one point that it was somebody kind of out of body following people. But for what purpose, right? Why? What does it accomplish? It has to do something, right? Thinking I'd had theories about this when I didn't think it was just hallucination. I'd have to go back and read them a bit. I think another one was something along the lines of if it's time loops, maybe it was echoes of a different loop. That makes sense? I don't know. But it always being behind you and taking one extra step. It's interesting. I don't know. That doesn't make a ton of sense for it to be a past loop. Oh man. Okay, those theories are in disarray. I will think a bit about those later. But that was a realization I cannot believe I did not consider that at any point. Ugh. He left as if he didn't hear anything. I could tell that he'd been sulky ever since we got here. I suddenly felt lonely, so I looked for him while walking around. I realized then that there was an altar in front of the statue. He might be there. It was a clean altar, an altar ornamented with religious artifacts. It was kept well maintained. I saw no dust. Didn't I say it was like a child jumping on the floorboards? I don't know. And didn't Keiichi say he felt like the presence was like a girl in chapter 1? Am I crazy? Am I crazy? Am I making this up? I wonder if this is somehow Rika. I don't know. I don't know that I want to go all in on that. I don't know that I want to go all in on that, but that's interesting. If the footsteps, what if they're somehow Rika? But she's dead, right? And they're still occurring, so that doesn't really make sense. Like, she's dead in chapter 3, and Keiichi, well, no, he does hear them, right? When he's, like, in the asylum. Okay, sorry, I need to stop, like, theorizing right here, right? Like, I typically do that in the after part, so let's keep going. It was well maintained. Well, I mean, I will keep doing theorizing in the middle. I don't really feel bad about that, but, like, I don't want to kill the pacing. It was kept well maintained. I saw no dust. That would mean, well, the flowers in the vase weren't wilting. I saw a pretty handkerchief under the vase. It looked out of place amongst everything else. I was fairly certain it was Rika Furude's handkerchief. That would mean this storehouse is maintained daily. It wasn't a forgotten ruin buried in dust, so the brutality that dwelled in this ritual storehouse is still alive and well in Hinamizawa. Well, that's not necessarily true. Just because she maintains the statue doesn't mean that she uses the torture implements. That's right. Something as ambiguous as Yashiro-sama's curse is nothing more than a simple delusion of the villagers. As Takano-san said, everything that happens in this world is done by humans. I'd accused Yashiro-sama of demoning away Satoshi-kun. But Yashiro-sama is just a statue made of bronze or wood. Is she about to blame Rika? It's nothing but an icon. There are, however, human beings who would try to make that icon seem real. The series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa is the result of human action. It shouldn't be called a Yashiro-sama's curse. If Satoshi-kun was the 4th year's victim, then he was victimized by a human being who was just acting the part of a curse. The person who demoned away Satoshi-kun must not be very far from me. The truth behind Satoshi-kun's disappearance was not so far from my grasp. Thump. I was startled by the sound. It sounded like somebody had dropped something. I looked over at Takano-san and Keiichi. Takano-san was still lecturing him. Okay, there was the sound. Interesting. Did she drop her scrapbook or something? Thump, thump, thump. Why did I say those out loud? Like, the sound came from right behind me, not from them. I never heard Satoshi-kun do that. It sounded like somebody was stomping on the floor in frustration. What is it? The sound continued, ignoring my question. Though I heard it right nearby, it sounded as though a child was hopping on a wooden floor somewhere distant.
どうしたの？サトシ君。何か怒ってるの？
I couldn't read his expressions. I thought he was mad, but I didn't sense any emotion from him at all. Was he mad that I touched the altar? Maybe you weren't supposed to do that. It's not that I'd been able to communicate with Satoshi-kun in a concrete way. I just talked to him. I was never expecting him to react like that. I didn't sense a willingness to communicate from this creepy sound. Then a chill ran up my spine. I felt as if all my pores were opening. I've been thinking that it was Satoshi-kun stomping on the floor. Hey, you're Satoshi-kun, aren't you? The sound stopped when I asked that. It wasn't a yes or a no, just silence. Satoshi-kun wouldn't scare me like that. I realized suddenly that the sound hadn't come from Satoshi-kun. A cold shiver shot through my feet and I sprung a step backward. The sound had come from right there. Even though I jumped back, it was still just a few meters away. Satoshi-kun would sometimes let me hear his footsteps when I walked. But if that wasn't Satoshi-kun, then there was no guarantee I'd hear its footsteps. So that invisible being could already be right in front of my eyes, and I just wouldn't see it? I forgot everything and ran, straining my ears as much as possible for any sound, listening for any footsteps pursuing me. I ran right into Keiichi and clung to him, timidly turning back to look. Okay, so that's what caused that. It wasn't the stories. The dimly lit area before the altar was quiet, like nothing was happening. But seeing that chilling dark stillness, realizing I was just in that space, made me even more frightened now.
どうしたよ、シオン。ひょっとして怖くなった？
Keiichi made fun of me. Even though he looked horrified just a little while ago, he now looked satisfied to see me scared too.
お化け屋敷で女の子がしがみついてくるのはデフォじゃないですか。まんざらでもないくせに。ほらほら、行きましょう。高野さんに置いてかれます。
I pretended to be fine, but I wasn't sure if I was able to hide my fear entirely. The footsteps were chasing me. They were outside the illumination of the lantern as if they couldn't go into the light. The presence never left us, however. It followed us like a fourth member of the party. Sometimes it made a stomping sound as if wanting some recognition, but neither Takano-san nor Keiichi seemed to notice it. It was possible for Takano-san to be ignoring it, but Keiichi would never ignore it. If he could hear it, he would have said something. So, just like with Satoshi-kun, only I could hear it. What was this thing that was making me so scared? Was it Satoshi-kun in a bad mood? Or was it possible that the presence I believed to be Satoshi-kun might not have been him at all? I think that's a lot more likely. What are you upset about, Satoshi-kun? Tell me if I did something wrong. I'll apologize. If you aren't Satoshi-kun, then where did he go? When did you take his place? I wonder if you can actually, grasp some form of communication from this, or if it doesn't really mean anything, and it's just like a get out type thing.
大丈夫か？
はい、全然平気ですよ。それよりケイちゃんこそ、顔面蒼白でかなりヤバげかと。
なら、あまり俺の服を引っ張りすぎないでくれると嬉しいんだけどな。
あ、こりゃ失礼です。
あらあら、私はお邪魔かしら？
I decided to engage in the conversation to help myself ignore the sound from behind. I didn't hear the sound as much, and it became a bit more distant. Yeah, I shouldn't pay attention to it. It wouldn't bother me if I didn't hear it. I should just ignore the noise.
で、高野さんはその風習が実は現代にも残っているんじゃないかと思って研究をしてるんです。そうでしたよね。
これ、本当に内緒なんだからね。
These thumps are creepy. I have no clue what they are.
シオンちゃんは理解のある人だから話したけど、他の村人には聞かれたくないの。
Because in retrospect, this is very different from just being footsteps. So, I should have given this more thought before, I think.
下手をしたら、罰当たり者ってことで、袋叩きにされかねないんだから。
She smiled at me like a witch.
前原くんも内緒にしてね。知られたら私、お社様のたたりに会うか、生贄にされちゃうかするかもしれない。たたりなら、今年はどんな死に方をさせられちゃうのかしら。生贄なら、鬼ヶ淵の沼に生きたまま沈められちゃうのかしら。そういえば、今夜よね。
Yeah, we know.
お社様のたたりがある夜は。
It certainly is. If the curse strikes for a fifth time, it'll happen tonight. Takano-san pulled out an old scrapbook from her paper bag and started turning the pages. What is this thumping? Part of me is wondering if this is supposed to be some kind of warning. The question then is obviously from who? Right. To what avail? Right, why only this time? Because, I mean, if it was just the footsteps probably isn't a warning. But, I don't know. This seems like a warning is the only thing I can think of as to what this would be. Takano-san pulled out an old scrapbook from her paper bag and started turning the pages. She opened it to the page with that one article. It was the article about the brutal murder of a Watanagashi victim. It happened in the Meiji era.
これは実際にあったお話よ。明治の終わり頃にね。鬼ヶ淵村で身元不明の惨殺死体が発見されたんですって。
It's getting more intense.
かくも無残かつ残虐非道を。
Hey, you guys seriously don't hear that? It's freaking loud. How can you not hear it? Ah, hell. It's freaking noisy. Cut it out already. And the next moment, we all heard a squeaking noise. We turned around in surprise. It was just Tomatake-san opening the door.
驚かせちゃったかな？
あら、二郎さんも見たくて我慢できなくなったかしら。ここ、素敵な拷問道具の宝庫よ。
僕は遠慮させてもらうよ。生来ね、こういうのは苦手なんだ。
Takano-san laughed as if making fun of Tomatake-san for being such a scaredy cat.
それより、演舞とセレモニーが終わって、みんな沢の方に降りていったよ。あと何分もしないうちにお祭りは終わっちゃう。
Time was up. I never expected that Tomatake-san would save me from this nightmare. His face suddenly looked heroic.
ケイチ君も出るかい？
もう十分に見ましたので。シオン、もういいだろ。出ようぜ。
Yeah, she's more than
綺
good.
麗な空気が吸いたいよ。
Ah, this is where Keiichi does the big dumb and flips the light, right? That's as they exit.
同感です。出ましょう。
Although, why would he do it as they're leaving? I went into the entry room and turned around. Takano-san was taking photos in a mad rush, though our time was up. I didn't hear that sound anymore. I didn't feel that presence. I didn't feel Satoshi-kun either. But somehow I wasn't too sad about that. Even if he followed me out here, I wouldn't be able to tell if it was really him or somebody else. Oh, snap. Okay, that was interesting. Are they going to cut it here? We're right at that point where I'm like, if this is the cut, it is. Do I record another chapter in here or not? I would make this a really long episode, most likely. I might do it, and then worst case scenario, I just split it. Let's go ahead and go through the tips, but we might have some stuff to talk about here. An underground torture room is officially called the Underground Ritual Storehouse. So do torture room and ritual storehouse mean the same thing? According to Takano-san's theory, bloody rituals, including Watanagashi, have been passed down among the three families even after the Meiji era. The rituals are always ready to be performed. Their form of worship always revolved around torture. So Hinamizawa's history involved a great deal of human slaughter. Takano-san's theory is correct. The underground storehouse at the Sonozaki's house looked well maintained. Takano-san is right about that too. Since the Sonozaki family and the Furude family both have ritual storehouses, the Kimiyoshi family must have one too. Yeah, that does make sense, actually. After all, these ancient and brutal customs are still handed down through the generations. I should remain armed with the knowledge that occult events are still secretly being performed in this cursed village. Okay, that's interesting. So they're called the same, like, it's called the Underground Ritual Storehouse, so it does kind of imply they're the same, same thing, and so there might be a third one that we don't know about. That is interesting. What we got on 173? The sanctity of the ritual storehouse is one of the most prominent elements in the worship of Yashiro-sama. Of course, I knew that, since I'm originally from Hinamizawa. But violating that sanctity is actually a more serious problem than I thought. Takano-san's research shows that the history of the ritual storehouse goes way back. The ritual implements within have long been viewed as inviolable objects, which is why it was strictly forbidden to enter. Takano-san's theory says that Watanagashi was once a public execution performed to stabilize the reign of the three families, rather than a purely religious ritual. If so, the ritual should hardly be called sacred. Under those circumstances, the implements should have been despised as symbols of hatred and fear. When instruments of fear are too visible, it only creates a reign of terror. To keep them as hidden as possible, and they gain divinity. Many said they would become tainted if the layman touched them. The only reason for that was to preserve their false prestige through secrecy, since they would lose their sanctity if revealed before the common folk. In other words, the true identity of the ritual storehouse's sacredness was fear. That was the true emotion ruling over this village. I mean, yeah, pretty much. That is pretty accurate. Let's go to 179. The reason why Takano-san and Tomatake-san were cursed is because they broke into the ritual storehouse. I don't know how the villagers found out about it. Maybe somebody was watching. Maybe there was an anti-theft alarm. Either way, our intrusion must have been reported to the highest level of the curse system. That's because, considering the distance between the village and the site where Takano-san's body was found, she must have been killed right after we came out of the ritual storehouse. It was done very quickly. It's possible that a special assassination team exists for this purpose, or that the plan had been set up a long time ago. They might have been secret agents of the Samazaki family, but the latter sounds more valid. But if so, who would have been the victim if nobody broke into the ritual storehouse? Isn't that the question? Right? Kind of makes you wonder, would there have been one at all, actually? I think this one was the most interesting to me. And that's a good question. How did the villagers find out about it? Was it Keiichi, like... Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't know. It kind of seemed like Mion maybe had an idea already. That, at least that Keiichi wasn't there. Maybe they didn't know. What if they didn't know? That's something I'm actually kind of curious about. Because the only one who really makes it seem like they knew was Shion, right? Mio knew Keiichi was not at the dance, but I don't think she necessarily said, like, I know you broke into the storehouse or something, right? What if they didn't know and this was just all planned, right? Like by Takano, right? Of course. Like getting them into the storehouse and then making it seem like that was the cause of Tomatake's death. Is that crazy? I don't know. I don't know that it is, actually. Especially when we consider the fact that Takano, her body was found, but it was supposedly already dead. So this was like pre-done, which means this had to be a plan laid out in advance, right? This wasn't, like, Takano's death was not a response by like an assassination team or something, you know? Like, it just couldn't have been. So, I don't know. I'm kind of starting to buy they didn't know at all, actually. That's a very interesting tip. Maybe reconsider some things. What was this one even saying again? Oh, this one was just saying the village is, like, ruled by fear. Right. This one was suggesting the third storehouse, which is an interesting thing to keep in mind, actually. I wonder if the third storehouse, would it be crazy to wonder if that's somehow where, like, the Great Disaster was, like, launched from? Whoever did it? That'd be kind of interesting. Okay, so, I guess we can talk about the chapter. So first of all, if it wasn't, this is pretty obvious, but this is chapter 2, right? That we're getting answers to. That's interesting, actually, because to me that implies in the next 2 chapters, we're going to get answers to chapters 1 and 3, which is very interesting, right? We're going to, like, directly get answers to these. They're probably not going to be completely unique scenarios. Okay, well, I say that. I assume that chapter 8 will be like the response to, assuming we're doing all responses, I assume chapter 8 would be the response to 4, if I had to guess. But I don't know that factually, so maybe not. But that would be my guess. So that, but I mean, that in itself is very interesting because getting some of the answers to chapter 2 really might start to explain things, you know? See how much we're off on, see how much we were right about, and then once we figure out what we were wrong about, we can maybe start to adjust those theories, you know. So I'm looking forward to that, of course. I'm really hoping that I'm not going to be wrong about it being Shion that was out and about doing things. Imagine if we just get like a, and then I was captured by Mion and I was held hostage for 3 days, and I'm just like, uh-oh. That'd be kind of awkward. God, I can't believe I left my webcam off for like 40 minutes. That was so dumb. Oh, man. But, so I guess we can kind of talk a little bit about what happened in this chapter. I mean, there was some big stuff here. Obviously, we saw it kind of start with her meeting Keiichi in a really suspiciously, or maybe not suspiciously, very similar event to how she met Satoshi, which is a little strange. Like, yet another tie between those two. It's kind of crazy how many they have. Like, seriously, like, how are they connected in, like, every single way? But she meets Satoshi, or not Satoshi, sorry, she meets Keiichi, and she kind of quickly realizes that she definitely does not like him as much as Satoshi, but she still seemed to kind of appreciate the warmth of his hand, right? Like, and just kind of basic stuff like that, like, but she felt guilty about that. She realized that Mion, like, loves Keiichi, and I think kind of just dropped it, right? And at this point, though, she goes... I think Keiichi reminds her of Satoshi, which is what starts to kind of set her off, right? And then it wasn't that bad until Mion kind of starts to talk about Keiichi a lot, right, while there. And, I feel like that really I feel like it really makes her get a lot more intense about Satoshi again, which might be what awakens the demon, right? If that makes sense, like, or what kind of results in it. Because to me, it's kind of looking like we're already seeing some stuff, like, she's having some, like, thoughts, like, wouldn't it only be fair if she lost the one she loved on Watanagashi too, right? Like, it's like, that's interesting, and maybe it explains why she snaps, right? Or at least part of it. But, I mean, obviously, then we start seeing scenes where she feels like Satoshi is following her, and she truly believes that is his presence behind her. But she kind of broke down, right? At the, when they were at the shrine, right, in which he was leaving. I'm assuming that was the day of the Watanagashi setup, but I might be wrong about that. I'd have to check. That is my assumption, at least. But she started breaking down and crying, and maybe that's also when things started to get really bad. And things are, because right after that is when she starts to feel his presence. And so at that point, yes, things have gotten, like, rough for her. And if we assume that she has, like, Hinamizawa syndrome or some kind of curse, this is when it's starting to really develop, right? Whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, it's starting to be really bad. If I think it's just a parasite, which, you know, could make sense, maybe that's when it's starting to really, like, take over, right? Like, she'd beat it back before. She'd beat it back before, but, you know, at that point, she just couldn't anymore, right? And that's when it kind of started to win out. But then we get to Watanagashi, and those thumps, they were interesting. What do they mean? And that's a really big question I don't have an answer to right now. I took it as some kind of warning. If I had to guess, it was like a warning, like, to, like, get out, or maybe be wary of Takano, right? But who is it? Because we know Toмотake heard it, and so that means these sounds were kind of synchronized between them, which means it isn't just a symptom of, like, having like a parasite or Hinamizawa syndrome again, whatever it is. It'd be funny if these are two separate things, right? But I'm assuming they're one and the same. Anyways, Tomitake hears them too, right? And he describes it as a similar sound. And so you gotta wonder if, like to me, that indicates that it's not just some hallucination, right? And now you really gotta wonder what the heck this is, right? Is this like actually like some kind of spirit almost, or like someone out of their body almost? Like, these sound so ridiculous to me, but I don't have a better explanation right now. If it is synchronized, I don't know how else you would explain that. It has to be an actual sound that only certain people can hear, but it is a real sound. To me, like, kind of Rika makes the most sense, honestly. But, like, Rika was occupied. How would she be doing that, right? Like, and I don't know. I truly don't know. Like, actually no clue. So I'm just gonna have to move on from that for now. But I think I'm just gonna go ahead and go into the next chapter. If this video ends up being too long, I might end up splicing in a conclusion here. But for now, we're just gonna keep going, because I can't. I forgot to save! I've done this every time. My relatives gathered at the Sonozaki house after the festival to have a little party. I mingled with my uncles and had fun. I was trying to get rid of my eerie memories of the ritual storehouse. Mion was acting as the successor, so I tried to stay away from her. I'm sure she would feel weird if I talked to her in a formal way. They're gonna have a fight tonight, if I had to guess. In consideration of the hag's old age, we ended the party around 11 p.m. We all helped to clean up, with the women washing the dishes in the kitchen, and the men folding the tables and putting them away in a storeroom. It only took about 30 minutes, then everyone left, one after another. By then, Mion was no longer acting as the Sonozaki successor, and was back to being her normal self. She gonna say something about Keiichi? Maybe I overexerted a little. I was lying on the tatami floor. Kasai asked me if I could get in the car, so I told him I'd rather not move anymore.
おねえ、今日泊まってってもいい？
Uh-oh. Okay, and this is where things are gonna get interesting.
ここで寝ちゃいたい。バッチャに見つかると怒られるよ。で、それよりシオン、明日は学校じゃないの？明日は開校記念日だからいいの。あんたの学校、開校記念日って年に何回あるわけ？
I was about to say, no, it's not.
まあ、いっか。じゃあ、笠井さん、シオンは今夜はうちで預かります。
わかりました。ではよろしくお願いいたします。
ほら、シオン起きて。ここで寝てるとバッチャに怒られるって。ほら、肩を貸すから奥に行こう。私の布団貸してあげるから。ありりー、おねー。
My alter ego told me that I'm in a demon's stomach. I wouldn't have woken up if I hadn't heard that voice, but when I stop, he always walks one extra step. I might not have woken up at all. I didn't remember much after that. I was probably brought to Mion's room and immediately crawled into the futon. After a while, Mion got her futon ready next to me, turned the lights off, and went to sleep. At least that's what I thought. I got up and turned the lights on. Mion's futon was empty. The futon felt cold. Mion must have left it a while ago. Did she go to the bathroom? No, the closest bathroom was right there down the hallway. The light in the bathroom was off. Where did she go? The ticking of the clock was loud and annoying in this silence. The hands pointed to a little before 3 a.m. Is she going to be in the torture dungeon? I was left alone all of a sudden, in this late night. I felt the eeriness of the ritual storehouse coming back to me, after almost managing to forget it in the ruckus earlier. I tried to sense my surroundings. In this house, there shouldn't be an eerie atmosphere, strange noises, or footsteps. I stepped out into the freezing cold hallway to look for Mion. When I did, I immediately noticed light coming from one of the nearby rooms. That room belonged to the hag. The hag went to sleep early and woke up early. She was very strict about her bedtime, so it was strange to see her light on in the middle of the night. I could hear voices too. Those voices belonged to the hag and Mion. I creeped up to the room and listened to their conversation. Since it was the middle of the night, I could hear their words very clearly.
しゃあもねえやんな。あんの赤いのも
Okay, they
ちょ
know.
い出張りすぎやったんや。
So they know.
まあね、お社様のお怒りに触れたんだから仕方ないしね。
Mion's voice sounded as cold as the one I'd heard down in the torture room. I held my breath.
警察は調べとっちゅうとろんが、すっとろん間違いなかんね。
多分ね、高野さんだろうね。
My heart almost stopped. Oyashiro-sama got angry. The police are investigating. It's probably Takano-san. And what day was it today? Those words told me that something was happening. My teeth started to chatter. I desperately tried to stop them. I felt like my body was swelling up suddenly. I could no longer hear as well. Man, you better hope they don't hear you. Calm down. Breathe. Listen more carefully. According to Mion and the hag's conversation, another incident definitely took place. The victims were Takano-san and Tomatake-san. From what I could tell, both Mion and the hag thought it made sense that whatever it was happened to them. No. I needed to think more calmly. They did say they deserved it for making Oyashiro-sama angry. Did they say Takano-san and Tomatake-san made Oyashiro-sama angry? How did they make Oyashiro-sama angry? They knew. My body started to shake. They knew we snuck into the ritual storehouse. And would that mean Keiichi and I were also subject to Oyashiro-sama's curse? Suddenly, a phone rang. The phone was by the front door. The front door was opposite the hag's room, farther down the hall. The ringing echoed throughout the long hallway. It sounded so eerie, almost like it was coming from hell. That was when I felt someone behind me. Of course, there was nobody there when I turned around. There was someone there a moment ago. I didn't know if it was Satoshi-kun. I didn't sense any emotions, so I couldn't tell. I also didn't know how long it had been there. It was as if that somebody was watching me listen in on their conversation. That was the feeling I got. That's an interesting thought. Is this some form of information gathering? Somehow, it couldn't be Satoshi-kun. Satoshi-kun would never be that intimidating or scary. My mind turned all red, like it was suffused with blood.
みーちゃんにはない？ひたひたと。
Oh.
ずっと足音がついてきて、夜は枕元にまで立たれて、
Having those thoughts
念を
right
される
now
経験。
is not good. I remembered what Ren of Ryugu had said on that rainy day.
そうならばみーちゃんは大丈夫。お社様には怒られない。
If Oyashiro-sama wasn't angry, nobody would follow me. So what did this mean? Ever since we snuck into the shrine storage, something has been following me? What is it? It was before that, so that doesn't really make sense. I don't think that's the explanation. I really don't. Calm down. That's right. Rena wasn't talking about me. She was talking about Satoshi-kun. That's what happened to Satoshi-kun.
サトシ君が体験していることは、すべてお社様のたたりの前触れなの。
That's right. That's why he encountered the curse of Oyashiro-sama.
誰かが遠くからじっと伺っている。
Dude, so Mion has totally walked out by now, right? Like, if the phone is ringing, like, there's no way.
誰かがずっとつけてくる。
Shion has definitely found out. A creepy feeling crawled up and spread across my back.
誰かがいつも自分のすぐ後ろから見ている。やがて足音は常に自分とずれて一つ余計に聞こえるようになるの。
I swallowed loudly. It's almost as though Ren of Ryugu was predicting what would happen to me. Had Rena been talking about Satoshi-kun back then? Or had she actually been talking about me?
やがて後ろのそれは自分の家の中にまでついてくるようになる。そしてお布団に入って明かりを消してもずっと枕元から見下ろしてるの。ただただ黙ってじーっと。
I knew by now that there was no mistake. No matter how I looked at it, she had been talking about me. I mean, I don't... And I don't necessarily think that has to be true, but that's interesting. I might need to reread that. Yes, me. It had been about me. The curse of Oyashiro-sama. What is the curse of Oyashiro-sama? That was when I actually felt something for real. Hi, Mion. Someone grabbed my collar. No voice came out. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was to open and close my mouth as if something was stuck in my throat. It was Mion. She looked even colder than how she'd looked in the underground torture room. It only made sense that she'd come out into the hallway to answer the phone. I tried to come up with an excuse. However, the way Mion looked at me was so cold. Even if I really had run into her by accident, I could tell by the look in her eyes that she wouldn't believe me. I felt cold sweat all over my body. I couldn't even move my fingers.
ごめん。
I apologized. I could have said something to get myself out of the situation, but the apology came out first. Mion didn't appear to hear me. She walked to the front door, still holding my collar. The phone was still ringing. A normal person doesn't usually let a phone ring so long at this time of night. The phone call itself didn't seem real to me. Mion picked up the phone.
ミオンです。そうですか。わかりました。そちらの対応はよろしくお願いします。それから、一切の口封じをよろしくお願いします。ええ、では。
Vague enough that I can't really make out much of what that would mean. Mion put down the phone after a short conversation. What did she mean? Make sure nobody talks about this. Confidential. Who called anyway? Mion put her forehead to mine and spoke to me.
聞いてた？
Which conversation was she asking me about? Well, she had to be talking about the one with the hag. If I said yes, what would happen to me?
知らん。何のことかわかんない。
Mion pulled my collar, pressed her nose on mine, and continued to speak.
聞こえた通りです。富武さんと高野さんがお社様のたたりに遭われました。本当にお気の毒なことです。
It was like I was talking to myself in a mirror, but what I was saying in the mirror was ever so
お
cold.
ねお社様のたたりって何です？富武さんは自らの手で喉をかきむしってお亡くなりになりました。高野さんは遠くの山奥でドラム缶に詰められて焼き殺されたそうで、実にお気の毒です。
Tomitake-san clawed at his own throat until he died? What? Takano-san was burned to death in an oil drum? What? What? I felt something furry crawl up my spine. I also felt like my stomach was turning upside down. I didn't feel any strength in my legs. If Mion let go of my collar, I'd probably collapse on the spot.
なんでそんな死に方したのかな。わかりませんか、シオン。
Okay, so my idea that maybe they didn't know was, I think incorrect. I'm asking you because I don't know.
わかんないよ。理由なんて一つしかないじゃないですか。
So how does she know, though? Please don't talk as if I already know the answer.
何の理由かな。
My heart was pounding. I felt that my next breath would be so bloody and hot that I'd choke on it.
そんなこともわかんないのですか。
It's because they made Oyashiro-sama angry. The first year as the manager of the dam construction site. The second year as the traitors to the village. The third year as the pacifist. The fourth year as the relatives of the traitors. I'd always thought the victims were people who had something to do with the dam conflict. Since I didn't do anything against the village during the dam conflict, I assumed I was safe. I should have known. I should have known everything would be the curse of Oyashiro-sama. I knew Oyashiro-sama's anger was the curse of Oyashiro-sama. I knew Oyashiro-sama would get angry if I snuck into the ritual storehouse. But since I wasn't held responsible in any way for the dam conflict, I never thought I would be a victim of the curse. Did I ever think that there would be an incident in the 5th year? Did I ever think that I'd be the victim of that 5th year incident? Tomitake-san snuck into the storehouse, and he clawed at his own throat until he died. Takano-san was burned to death in an oil drum. It must be a lie. It couldn't be true. Even if it was forbidden, it was just a space for storing some old torture implements. How could they be killed for just sneaking in there? especially in such gruesome ways. But I thought about it again and realized those people were absolutely capable of doing things like that. The main Sonozaki family was capable of it. The Sonozaki family had been pulling the strings behind the series of mysterious deaths. They could do it. The Sonozaki family even kidnapped the grandson of the Minister of Construction during the dam conflict. They could do it. The question is, are they actually pulling the strings? That's a very important question, to be honest. The Sonozaki family made Satoshi-kun disappear completely. They could do it. I feel like her temper is about to boil over. Yeah, that means she's about to go insane. Mion leaned against me before falling onto the cold hallway floor. She collapsed rather violently. I usually didn't go to sleep with my stun gun, but since I was too tired and sleepy to get ready for bed, I still had it on me. I had my stun gun on me. I finally understood. I didn't know who killed them exactly, whose idea it was or who ordered it. I didn't even know who was actually involved. But Mion and the hag knew everything. Satoshi-kun. Now I finally know. Now I know what I need to do. I will settle the score for you, Satoshi-kun. I will avenge you, Satoshi-kun. I won't be killed like you, Satoshi-kun. I walked into the hag's room. She was sitting up to take some medicine. Her back was turned to me. Mion and I are twins. If I acted like her, the hag wouldn't notice the difference. I didn't think she ever suspected me. I put my stun gun to her neck and pulled the trigger. I heard an indescribable electrical sound, and the hag's lights went out. She fell in a twisted position that probably straight up killed her, to be honest. I didn't know how long it would take a person to regain their freedom of movement after getting knocked out with a stun gun, so I had to restrain them before they woke back up. I was unbelievably calm. The key to the underground torture room was in the forbidden drawer that only the head of the family can access. Mion had told me about this once. I never looked for the drawer before, but I found it exactly where I thought it would be. The key was on a keychain with several of its sisters. Each key had a little plaque on it that said what it was used for. They were all in Mion's handwriting. She was an idiot for being so conscientious, but it sure helped me out. I put the keychain in my pocket and headed to the outdoor storeroom to find a cart. I found a large flashlight there as well. There was a strap on the flashlight so I could put it on my shoulder. That way I'd have both hands free to carry Mion and the hag. I loaded Mion and our grandmother onto the cart and carried them to the underground torture room. I was prepared to use the stun gun again if they woke up while I was working, but it was more powerful than I imagined, and the hag showed no signs of waking. This was the stun gun Kasai specially ordered for me when I told him I wanted a powerful one. I remembered him telling me that it was an illegally modified stun gun and I should never use it just for fun. I used my flashlight to find the light switch. I found it easily and turned it on. All the lights went on in the basement. Although there was now illumination, it was very dim. I moved quickly so as to finish what I needed to do before they woke up. I decided to put Mion in a cell beyond the torture room. The lights in the torture room were so bright that it was like daylight. There was a door there. I was fairly certain the cells were on the other side of the door. The proper key was here. The keys made a tinkling sound. I felt cold air coming in through the gap in the door. There must be a huge opening on the other side. I opened the door and I saw nothing but darkness. I felt along the wall to find a light switch. I turned the switch on and the light bulbs lit up, revealing a huge rocky cave. Okay, so I mean, I think it's already safe to say at this point that barring some insane switcheroo, like Mion waking up and slumping Shion here, I was right about this all being Shion. I mean, I was so confident in this at this point anyways, but it didn't look like a natural cave. It looked more like an air raid shelter. There were several hollow openings with bars across them. Those were the cells. I walked up to the closest cell and checked to see if it was strong enough to confine her. I pushed and pulled on the bars. I rammed against them with all my weight and decided they were perfectly sturdy. This was secure enough to be called a cell. I opened the lock and carried Mion in. I wasn't particularly strong, just average. I never thought I was strong enough to carry a whole person. But now I didn't need to pretend to be weak. I could easily lift and drag their bodies. I put Mion in the cell. She seemed to moan a little. I didn't need to check to make sure. The effect of my stun gun was wearing off. I closed the bars and turned the key in the lock. Then I ran to the hag, who must have been starting to wake up too. Fortunately, there was no sign of her regaining consciousness. Maybe the difference in age had something to do with it. She literally might be dead already, to be honest. I looked for a table to restrain her on. I found a wheelchair with restraints for the hands and feet. I put the hag in it. Of course, she didn't resist, but her dead weight made it seem like she was a huge French doll, but one made of flesh. Probably going to use some torture implements on her. She might lose her fingernails. I put her hands on the armrests and restrained them at the wrists with the metal rings and hinges. I did the same with her feet. This must have been a wheelchair specifically remodeled to restrain a person. Other than the restraints, it was a regular wheelchair. I waited for the hag to wake up. I had so many things I wanted to ask her. I didn't think she'd answer honestly, but I had plenty of tools to make her talk. I was in no rush. When the hag had a concern, relatives took care of the problem. That was how it worked in the Sonozaki family. She was the leader of the family, so all the information they gathered would make its way to her. She must know everything that happened in Hinamizawa, including the curse of Oyashiro-sama. I'm interested to hear about that potentially. I heard a noise from the cell. Mio must have woken up before the hag did. Speaking of the hag, she didn't seem like she was about to wake up anytime soon, but she was restrained even if she did, so I had no need to fear. I left the hag there and headed for the cell.
Shion, これは何の真似ですか?
She talked like the successor, but she also sounded frightened. She obviously understood the situation she was in right now.
おはよう、ミオン。
How are you just gonna say that like that right now? That's crazy.
まさか自分が閉じ込められることになるとは思わなかった？園崎家当主代行として命じます。ここを開けなさい。
You didn't seriously think that would work, did you? If she went to the lengths to throw you in there, she clearly has a problem with you.
声色に一つ凄みが欠けますね。当主様はもっと傲慢な言い方をしなきゃね。もっとも、そういう言い方ができたとしても、今のあんたは滑稽なだけなんだけどさ。
There was nothing funny about it, but I wanted to intimidate Mion. My laughter echoed throughout the cave. It was artificial and meaningless laughter. I heard it over and over as it echoed. It sounded as if I wasn't the only one laughing. I couldn't stand it, so I stopped. Silence filled the air. That silence almost hurt my ears, so I started to speak.
富武さんと高野さんが今年の犠牲になるとはね、思わなかった。高野さんのドラム缶に詰めて焼き殺したってのもなかなかやるね。ま、あの人はそういう死に方を自分で希望してたっぽいからね。
Possibly.
結構満足してるかもよ。
Mion didn't say anything. She just stared at me to see how I'd proceed.
富武さんの自分で自分の喉を引き裂いたってのは何？凶器に駆り立てるような怪しいお薬でも注射したの？それともそういう死に方に見せるような拷問道具でもあるわけ？
Mion didn't reply. I was smiling boldly, but I became impatient and finally kicked the bars. It made a violent noise. Mion jumped as if she was kicked directly.
返事がないと退屈です。私を怒らせるとどんな得が？私が知るわけないでしょう。
Mion finally replied. She was odious, but at the same time sounded pitiful.
ねえ、ミオン、次期当主様、ここまで来ちゃったんだから、
I just too many things I wanted to ask her. I wanted to ask her about me, about the incident, about the curse, about Satoshi-kun. I didn't even know where to start. Before I asked her about those, I asked her one other thing.
私に対して反抗的な態度をとっても何の得にもならないこと。理解。
Oops. Mion glared at me silently. Because we were twin sisters. Because we were twins, I knew that was just a bluff.
もうここまでやっちゃった以上、私も引っ込みがつかないんで。お姉も私に容赦とか躊躇とかそういうものをあまり期待しない方がいいかもです。
Mio must have been feeling the cold sweat on her face. Although the light was dim, I could tell she was frightened.
じゃあ聞くよ。ひなみ沢村連続開始事件、通称お社様のたたり。これってどういう意味があるの？やっぱりダム戦争のけじめってやつ？私は多分そうだと思ってる。
Mion sounded a little confused, but she answered. I felt satisfaction now that we were communicating. I continued with a smile.
思ってるって言い方が少し頼りないね。そのあたりの事情は詳しくないの？
I wonder if we're really going to get much information here. We might get some. I'm very curious to see how this plays out.
シオンだって分かってるでしょ。次期当主なんてバッチャの取り次ぎに過ぎないよ。
Yeah, right.
その当主様と意思を疎通させて以心伝心なのが次期当主様の役目でしょ。取り次ぎに過ぎないなんて信じると思う？
いつも身近にいる私だってたまにバッチャが何を考えてるのかわからない時があるもん。何でもかんでも私が理解してるわけじゃない。
じゃあお社様のたたりってのはあいつが全部独断で決めてるわけなんだ。 次期当主様と相談して決めてるのかと思ったよ。
やばい話は全部バッチャが一人で決めてる。私なんか預かり知る余地もない。
でもばあさんの独断だとしたって、あいつはあんたを介してやり取りしてるわけでしょ。そのあんたが何も知らないなんてあるはず。
違うよ。私なんかを介していない。私にだってよくわからないんだけど、私が陽の部分を取り継いでるとしたら、陰の部分を取り継いでいる誰かがいると思う。
Interesting.
誰？その影の部分の取り次ぎって。
知らない。
誰かを招いて話してるとことか電話をしているとことか見たことない？強いて言えば毎年お社様のたたりの時期になると連絡量がどっと増える相手ね。
わかんない。心当たりなんかないよ。
Mion shook her head.
まあいいや。じゃあ質問を変えるね。今年のたたりの富武さんと高野さんはダム戦争に直接関係してないのに、なぜ犠牲に選ばれたの？やっぱり西宮殿に忍び込んだから？
As soon as Mion heard the words ritual storehouse, her expression shifted.
西宮殿に？
No, they didn't
ウル
actually
テ神社の
know.
西宮殿を犯したの？
They actually didn't know.
ありゃ、知ってるとばかり。
そんなことをしたら、バカ、当然だよ。
Mion muttered bitterly while shaking her head repeatedly. Mion's reaction made me realize the true meaning of the forbidden storehouse for ritual implements. The ritual storehouse is a sacred building, so nobody can go inside. The curse will fall upon any who disobey. Any child would know that rule. However, just because they knew about it didn't mean that they all believed in it. Although they were told they would be cursed, most of the kids were actually enjoyed hearing the stories. They simply didn't believe it was true. However, Mion's reaction told me it absolutely was. If they actually did that, of course something would happen to them. She was saying that if someone snuck into the ritual storehouse, that person should be killed.
私がこっちに帰ってきて以降、たまにミオンとは認識が食い違いますね。そりゃ私だって西宮殿が迂闊に入っちゃやばいとこだってのは知ってますけど、あんな死に方しても当然だってほどやばいとは思わないんだけど。私たちだってその程度の認識じゃなかったでしたっけ？
それはシオンがよく知らないだけだよ。
すみませんね、よく知らなくて。説明をいただいてもよろしいですか？
そりゃシオンの言う通り、子供の世界ではやばいとかたたりがあるとか言ったってどうせ迷信に過ぎないだろう。でも大人にバレたらかなり怒られるんだろうなって程度の認識だと思う。でもね、ひなみ沢の古老たちにとってはそんな甘いものじゃないの。
Mion explained to me how the elderly people blindly believed in Oyashiro-sama and how sacred the festivals are to them. It's probably something their younger generations would never understand, but they're possessed by a very strong, deeply rooted devotion towards Oyashiro-sama. Mion then went on to tell me about how sinful it was to violate the rule of the ritual storehouse. I just couldn't believe things like that were still going on even in the modern day. I couldn't even reply appropriately. But even if it was unbelievable, I couldn't ignore what I was hearing from my twin sister.
なるほどね。でもさミオン、たたりで一人が死んだらそれを相殺する意味で一人を生贄にするのがルールじゃなかったっけ？生贄の死体は出ない。なのに今回は二人とも死体が出ちゃってるんだけど、そのあたりはどう見る？
Mion doesn't know that besides Takano-san and Tomatake-san, Keiichi and I also snuck into the ritual storehouse, so I tried to lead her a little.
確かにおかしいね。
高野さんの焼死体は見つかっちゃいけなかったってことなのかな。本当は高野さんは失踪ってことになるのがパーフェクトだったのかな。
あるいは自信はないけど。
何？根拠なんかいらないから言ってみてよ。怒らないから。
Mion hesitated a little first and then started to speak.
西宮殿に忍び込んだのは実は4人とか。
それで？
でもう2人は生贄ってことで鬼隠しになってるんじゃないかな。
Okay, so this is where the idea gets put in her head. Is that where we're ending this off? Or is this going to be a scene transition? This would be a really short chapter if this was it. Okay. Mion's words were stuck in my head. If those 2 dead bodies were the result of the curse, then there should be 2 sacrifices to calm Oyashiro-sama's anger. The 4 of us snuck into the shrine storage together. It was a simple equation. Did that mean that Keiichi and I were in danger? I got drunk, fell asleep, and decided to stay overnight. Is that because of the alcohol? Or did someone put a drug in my drink? It's not like me to get drunk and spend a night at the hag's house. I wanted to forget about what happened in that eerie storehouse, so I drank too much. But it really was strange for me to get that drunk. Maybe. It was a good thing I woke up in the middle of the night. I could have been the one to wake up in a cell. Sometimes it's hard to recognize danger when you avoid it accidentally. A part of me wanted to just laugh at the idea, but another part felt frightened that I was so close to being in Mion's position. Yeah? Maybe there is something to that. I don't know. I'm trying to, like, make sense of it myself right now. I'm trying to think. First of all... If it is literally just, like, surface level, like, they snuck into the storehouse, they died, right? And now these 2 are potentially next. It would also imply that this probably happened in Chapter 1, maybe? And probably happened in Chapter 3 with 2 more people sneaking in, right? 2 more unknown people, specifically. Which is interesting. Like, it maybe means something, but I don't know. I'm still kind of thinking it was kind of pre-planned. But, like, why? Why is Tomatake, or not Tomatake, God, I keep saying Tomatake, Takano, why is her body found this time? When it wasn't in Chapter 1, like, what changed? I mean, the amount of people, presumably. Like, maybe, that were, like, part of the plan? I don't... Could this have been pre-planned by Takano? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to think right now regarding the curse killing. We're just going to move on. I'll have to think about this a bit later. Part of me wanted to just laugh at the idea, but another part felt frightened that I was so close to being in Mion's position. If my thinking was correct, I wonder how Keiichi Maibara was doing right now. I didn't see him in any of the cells, but that didn't guarantee his safety. Takano-san and Tomatake-san had been executed. There was a possibility that Keiichi could already be dead. But just like what happened to Satoshi-kun, it might only happen after a few days. When the sun rose, I was going to pretend to be Mion and head to her school. I was going to check if Keiichi Maibara was safe. If he had already disappeared, the enemy would come after me next. I'd have to be a decoy for myself, but if he was still safe, I'd need to keep my eyes on him. I was sure the enemy would come after that. I'm sure the enemy would come after that scatterbrain. If I became Mion, Shion would disappear. The enemy would think Shion had already been demoned away, and they'd concentrate on Keiichi. If nothing happened to Keiichi, that would also be fine. It'd prove that nothing would happen to me either. The hag was still sleeping in the wheelchair. I was going to interrogate her, but actually I wasn't expecting to learn that much. The woman who was also known as Empress Sonozaki probably wouldn't say a thing even if her fingers were cut off. Mion, her successor, was the complete opposite. She spoke readily, but didn't know too much about anything. Mion had said she was only a messenger, and that someone else was taking care of problems on the underside. That's interesting. I mean, who would that be? Assuming it's a character we know, I'm going to be honest, the first person that comes to mind is Oishi. That's crazy, right? Like, I mean, it could also obviously just be Takano, right? It could literally just be Takano, but, like, I don't know. Like, it could be Takano, Tomatake, or Oishi, in my opinion. Takano probably makes the most sense, but there's still a part of me that can't help but feel like Oishi has some kind of connection here, and, like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I just can't help but feel that way. But I think Takano makes the most sense, to be honest. It was possible Mion had grown to be a good liar, and that she tried to deceive me with a straight face. But at the same time, I could see the hag not letting Mion get involved in the underside of the village. If I were her, I wouldn't have used Mion for that either. Unlike me, Mion was a nice person. While there were only ones and zeros in the world, she believed there were numbers with decimal points. In other words, she could never be cruel. If the hag thought the same way as I do, it was very possible. The one who took care of problems on the underside, X, was the one who actually governed the curse of Oyashiro-sama. If the hag became concerned about something, X would deal with it, either directly or indirectly. Or maybe the hag and X would discuss the details first. But did X really exist? If he did, his place in the village hierarchy was a lot more important than that of the successor. Unlike Mion, who was too nice, he was discreet, cruel, and cunning. Furthermore, he was extremely close to the hag, someone who would have a lot of contact with her just before it was time for the curse. Maybe he suspects the mayor? Or she suspects the mayor, that is. Because of the way Tomitake-san died, it could be someone who regularly dealt with unusual drugs. He could be a member of a medical institution. Ooh, she's suspecting Irie. The director of the Irie clinic. Irie? In this isolated village, Irie was famous for opening such a beautiful clinic, and for working so hard for the villagers' sake. The villagers liked his mature personality and really respected him. There's nothing scarier than a doctor who's also a murderer. If Irie was the person behind the curse, all the mysterious deaths could be explained. However, there was only a slim chance of Irie being X. The main reason being that the hag wouldn't trust him. Like many of the elderly, the hag doesn't like young people. I knew she'd never trust him because of his age. Furthermore, she had openly criticized his behavior among the relatives once. Although Irie was famous, he was an outsider, after all. He wasn't born here. He tried to maintain a good relationship with the villagers as the director of the clinic, but that was just on the surface. I couldn't even imagine the hag telling him about her worries or about the village's underside. If she was as suspicious of others as I was, then she'd only gather trustworthy people to deal with that underside. The first people that came to my mind were the leaders of the three families. Leaving Rikachama out, the head of the Kimiyoshi family was a strong possibility. He was the only one who could advise Empress Sonozaki. They were of a similar age, and everyone knew that they were very close outside the family councils. I mean, yeah, I'm not shocked that she suspects him. I'm not sure that I completely believe it, but it's definitely not impossible. Furthermore, as the mayor, he often went to the Sonozaki house just before Watanagashi to discuss festival preparations. I could easily picture them talking privately. The one who executed the curse of Oyashiro-sama, the one who murdered Takano-san and Tomitake-san, the mastermind behind the series of the mysterious deaths that have been going on for the past 5 years. Was he coming after me? Did he get to Satoshi-kun? When I thought about Satoshi-kun, I felt elevated. I was fearful of possibly being this year's victim until just a moment ago. I was scared that X was after me. But when I thought about it, I realized, whoever it was, this person had gotten Satoshi-kun. I looked so hard, but I couldn't find him. I'd almost forgotten about this enemy. For better or for worse, he was going to appear before me again. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find that enemy. But now, he was trying to find me. That was it. I wasn't only being chased. I was chasing, too. When I realized all this, I was no longer afraid of dying to the fifth year's curse. It had become a game. I wasn't only being threatened, I was threatening, too. Now was the time to settle the score for Satoshi-kun. Now was the time to awaken passion that had grown weak over the past year. I could feel righteous indignation and courage flare up within me. The only emotion that can defeat fear is anger. When my anger completely overtook my fear, I felt as if I were reborn.
Onibaba-sama, そろそろ目を覚ましてくださいません?
I kicked her wheelchair rather violently, but I didn't wake her up
ひょ
either.
っとして眠ったふりをしてやり過ごそうとか
Bro,
考
you need
え
to
てま
check
せん?
her pulse. I grabbed her hair and pulled her head up, but even then the hag still stayed silent with a straight face. And I noticed something. I looked for an appropriate torture device. They were all larger scale, none of them being particularly handy. That's when I saw a cigarette lighter on a cushion in the tatami room. One of the relatives must have left it there. I lit the lighter. A huge flame appeared. I turned the lighter off and went back to the hag with
見え
it.
てます?見えてない。これ誰の忘れ物かわかりませんけどね。ライターです。
I lit it in front of her eyes.
今からこれであなたの鼻を焼きます。嫌でしょ?私も嫌です。ですから寝たふりをやめてください。
There was still no response. I put the flame right under her nose without hesitation. The tip of the flames touched the tip of her nose. The flame must have burned her nose hair. It smelled terrible. I was already certain, but I continued anyway. I brought the flame closer to her eye. Her eyelid didn't move one bit. The flame burned her eyelashes, making it smell awful again. I turned the lighter off and then felt her throat and wrist. I didn't feel any warmth. Yeah, she straight up died to the stun gun. I didn't feel a pulse either. There goes those answers.
スタンガンで死んだ
There was no way she could pretend to be asleep while being burned. Even if she can endure the pain, anyone would reflexively move their eyelids if a flame came close to their eyes. But she didn't. I turned the sink water on and aimed the end of a hose at the hag's face. The water pressure wasn't too high, but by squeezing the tip of the hose, I could make it squirt out. Water hit the hag in the face, but there was still no reaction. Oh yeah, she dead. Shit. You've got to be kidding me. She's dead. The one who was at the center of everything is dead now. I knew she wouldn't talk, but I didn't expect her to end up dead. I'd never even thought of killing her. I walked around the room restlessly. I didn't feel guilty, and instead felt frustrated with what I'd done. Come on. I need to calm down. What do I need to be afraid of? Calm down and stay cool. Calm down, stay cool. I could feel my brain starting to calm down, and my emotions cooling down with it. She was my true enemy. It was just that I killed her before confronting her about it. Sooner or later I would have killed her anyway. She wouldn't have said anything in the first place, so there wasn't really a reason why I should have let her live. I didn't realize that until now. That was why I got frustrated. Yeah, I mean, you're probably not wrong. My revenge for Satoshi-kun started with the unexpected death of my grandmother. It was such a strange feeling, like I was wearing sopping wet clothes. I replaced that feeling with anger. I couldn't forgive her. I couldn't forgive the hag for abusing the Hojo family, including Satoshi-kun, for so many years. She cornered him psychologically as well as physically. She didn't deserve an easy death from a stun gun. I picked up a whip that was hanging on the wall. The whip was designed to make sure the person on the receiving end got seriously injured. I swung it up and then down. The sound reminded me of when I was a child hitting things with a jump rope I pretended was a whip. But unlike then, I'd made a purple mark on the hag's face, and reddish-black blood started oozing out. I swung it up and then down again. This time the whip hit her in the head. Her hair flew in the air. I saw a bunch of her hair on the tip of the whip. At the end of the bunch of hair, there was a piece of her skin. It seemed the whip had ripped part of her scalp off. I continued to hit her with the whip. I didn't bother removing the hair beforehand. The tip of the whip was divided into many points, with each point having a fish hook on the end. Ooh. Those hooks, added to the speed of the whip, not only scratched the victim, but tore their skin as well. That can't feel good. The hag's hair was all messed up and her face was getting bloody. She'd started to look like a real demon. I stopped the whipping. Not because my arm was tired, but because I couldn't stand the feeling of her hair on the tip touching me every time I swung the whip. I threw the whip at the hag. Breathing heavily, I realized I was covered in her hair. It almost felt like thousands of maggots crawling all over me. I brushed it off violently. You gotta love the Higurashi when someone goes actually insane and we get to see their perspective. It's very interesting, actually. I put my hands on my knees and exhaled roughly. It was then that I noticed it. I perked up and turned around. There it is. The person who had been watching me since I snuck into the shrine's storage. I sensed this person sitting in the tatami room and enjoyed watching me torture my grandmother. An overwhelming emotion started to swallow me up. I tried desperately not to feel
い
it.
つからそこにいたんだか言ってくれればよかったのに
It was just there. Just like Satoshi-kun, it was just there. It was extremely uncomfortable to have it just be there.
そっかレナが言ってたもんねあんたお社様ってのは
I smiled boldly, and yet I could feel my body shivering.
冗談じゃないあんたがお社様でたたりは本当にお社様のたたりってわけなのバーカ誰が信じるかよへ
It was just my imagination. It couldn't be the curse of Oyashiro-sama. The curse couldn't be real. Everything was done by humans. It made everything look like it was a curse.
まああんたが見たいってんなら勝手だけどさ私は見物料を取るつもりもないでも私の邪魔をしようってんならあんただって容赦しないよ
No matter what I said, nothing happened. I have no clue what that presence is. It was like trying to communicate with an insect. I felt like I was staring at a spider in the middle of its web, and the spider was staring back. I turned to the hag in the wheelchair. I couldn't leave her body here forever. I don't need to make her death known, and it should be quick, and it's best if a body doesn't exist. Not even in this secret underground torture room. Whew. I exhaled to try to calm myself down. Oh, I remember now. When I was a little girl, Kasa used to love making me feel scared. He often told me scary stories about various horrible things. I recalled a story about the secret torture room of the Sonozaki family. According to the story, there was a well in the torture room for dumping bodies in. There was a pile of tortured corpses at the bottom of the well, and resentful moans could be heard echoing from there. And about halfway down the well, there was a different tunnel, which was a secret passage leading into the distant mountains. That bit was from Mion's telling of the story. It was probably an amalgamation of tellings from different relatives. The room was supposed to be a huge secret, but everyone got loose lips at the chance to have fun scaring the young successor.
ミオン、昔親戚の誰かが言ってたじゃん。この地下拷問室のどこかに隠し井戸があって、外へ出られる秘密の通路があるって話。さっきの音は聞こえてなかった？鬼ババを鞭で叩く音。
Mion didn't reply, but I saw her bite her lip.
大丈夫。あんたは叩かない。でもね、あんたが不愉快だと、鬼ババをもっと叩くかもしれない。今度は鞭なんかじゃなくて。
そこの奥。
Yeah, ooh, man, God, what would happen if you tortured her again?
暗がりにも牢屋があるでしょう。その中。
Man, wouldn't it be crazy? It would totally have an impact if you tortured her again. Mion pointed weakly. I walked down to where her finger indicated. A light bulb lit up the cell. It was a lot smaller than the one Mion was in. It was very shallow, and I didn't even need to open the door to see how tiny it was. Of course, there's no well in there. I became angry, assuming that she lied to me, but after considering it, I didn't actually think she would at this point. I opened the door and walked in. I noticed something immediately. There was an opening right in the middle of the cell. This opening was naturally disguised. The way the rocks and the shadows were positioned perfectly hid the well. The tip of a rock inside of the cell concealed the entrance. Unless you went in, you'd never notice. It was such a shallow cell that nobody would ever think of going in. Besides, the bars allow you to see inside the cell well enough. The cell is not even a few meters deep, so it would only take a glance to see everything. Nobody would think of unlocking the door and walking in. But walking in was the only way anyone could find the well. Furthermore, there were many cells in this huge cave. You would think that one of them was hiding a secret well. The inside of the well was dark. I couldn't see anything. But every little noise I made produced echoes. I could tell this was a very deep well. I brought a flashlight from the torture room and shone it down the well. It almost looked more like a vertical tunnel. Obviously a man-made one, at that. There were wedges on the wall, like a ladder. They looked as if they were inviting me to descend. It's kind of ironic that the secret escape route from an underground torture room ended up being a well that takes you even further down. You had no way of knowing whether it would take you to freedom or to hell. Furthermore, there were the tortured bodies of past victims at the bottom. Who would be able to go down this well without hesitation? Nobody in their right mind could go down this well to look for a secret tunnel, hearing the voices of the dead all the while.
ミオンはあの井戸降りたことあるの？
降りたくもない。
それに関しては著しく同感。この拷問室の犠牲者たちが放り込まれた井戸になんか好き好んで降りたくはないもんね。
I went back to the torture room and then returned to the cave, pushing the wheelchair containing the hag. Mion screamed.
シオン、ばっちゃん落とす気？
落とすんじゃないよ。捨てるんだよ。
Yo.
もう死んでるしね。さっきの拷問で死んだんじゃないよ。多分鬼ババはスタンガンで死んだんだよ。心臓麻痺とかで。放置してもいいけど、虫が湧くと嫌でしょ？
ひどい。
なんなら死後の鬼ババの世話もする？湧いてくるウジを箸でつまんで捨てるとかやってみる？
Oh my god. Mion covered her ears and shook her head. I'm guessing this is when it really, Mion really is going to start to break. Everything I said seemed to bother Mion. Her own life wasn't guaranteed at this point.
シオン、どうしてこんなことを。
さーて、どうしてだと思います？
Nobody said anything for a while, but the silence was soon broken.
サトシ、敵討ちってこと？
敵討ちになったかもわからないけどね。いきなり後ろからバチンだったから、何が何やらわかんないうちにご臨終だったろうし。ねえミオン、今こうして思い返すと、私はやっぱりばあさんを殺すだけの理由があったように思うの。なぜかわかる？単にサトシ君を殺した張本人だからってだけじゃないよ。それは嘘をついたから。
I slapped the hag's head.
あんたも言ったよね。私が爪を剥がせば全て許すって。だから私は爪を剥がしたんだよ。3枚も。それでけじめがついたってことになったんだよね。でも約束は守られなかった。サトシ君はやっぱり消されてしまった。どうして？どういうことなの？
I continued to slap the hag's head. Her blood was all over my hand by then, and it felt gross. I tried to wipe it off on her clothes, but then her hair got on my hand. I ran to the sink in the torture room and washed my hands with a brush. When I was done, I went back to Mion's cell.
あの時、サトシ君がいなくなってしまった後、あんたが来て言ったよね。サトシ君と私の関係は、けじめがもうついてたって。そしてこうも言ったよね。サトシ君の失踪の理由は、園崎本家は何も知らないと。
Yeah, she clearly does not believe that.
うん。嘘だ!
Lied, 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 lied. Lied, lied. My shouts echoed throughout the cave. I was breathing heavily. I felt like I used up all of the air in my lungs.
あんたが何も知らないのは本当だと思う。あんた自身、ばあさんに真の意味で信頼を得ていたかは怪しいからね。でも、ばあさんが本当に私のけじめでサトシ君を許したかはわからないよ。アマちゃんのあんたに、本当のところを打ち明けるわけもない。
The hag didn't keep her promise. She said she'd forgive everyone, but she lied. She didn't forgive. She didn't forgive Satoshi-kun.
嘘つき、嘘つき、嘘つき、嘘つき、嘘つき、嘘つき！返してサトシ君！返してよサトシ君！返して！
I kicked the hag's leg repeatedly. Each time I kicked, the wheelchair made a squeaky noise. I ran out of breath and kneeled down. Mion was still covering her ears and was now shaking. There were tears in her eyes.
怖がらせちゃったね。ごめん。ミオンがミオンの言うように何も知らなかったなら安心して。でも、もしミオンも嘘をついていたなら仕方ない。その時はどういう目に遭わされても仕方ない。
Jesus, man.
仕方ないよね。
I'm assuming that's the end of the chapter. Goodness. Well. Okay, we're still getting tips. Notebook page 183 and 185. Let's see what these are about. I wasn't planning to kill the hag so quickly. I was going to kill her anyway, but it was too soon. People would normally assume that the Sonozaki family operates as a hierarchy, but that's not true. It's actually more like a system of government. Several ministries stem from the main family, and each forms a hierarchy of its own. These ministries don't communicate with one another. The people who belong to a given ministry don't know what other ministries are doing. That way, the Sonozaki's family dealings are kept perfectly secret. Of course, the most important people in the family govern several ministries. They know, of course, about their own ministries, and they know a little bit about the ministries their relatives run, but none of them know everything. There are ministries that work in the open. There are ministries that work unseen. There are some smaller ones that Oryu runs herself. Mion seems to know about most of them, but she doesn't necessarily know them all. In fact, she didn't know about the curse. Considering that, the fact that the hag died before I can interrogate her is a huge loss. Yeah, it kind of is. Kind of is. She's likely the only one with that information. What's on page 185? Kind of curious when these were written. Like in the middle of her being crazy? The head of the Kimiyoshi family was the one who called the main house most often after the 5th year's curse. My father called the second most. My parents were still high in the hierarchy, but the stir caused by my mother's disownment still hung over us, so we got treated as outcasts. So the fact that my father received so many calls proved how much the hag valued us despite the distance at which we were kept, demonstrating her own two-faced respect for both sides of the coin. Yeah. My father seems to be in charge of the Intelligence Bureau. He reported police information, gossip, and rumors going around in the Yakuza business to the hag. He silences, stirs, and distorts that information at her request. He's probably the one who was calling Mion. By the way, my servant Kasai is an old friend of my father's. That must be why Kasai knows many things. But I don't know if my father is involved in the curse's execution. My assumption is that although he gathered information on the police investigation about the case, he wasn't involved in the execution itself. The fact that my father and the hag have this close connection isn't widely known. People know that she uses his information network, but they don't look very far beyond that. In the same way, it's possible that a curse execution team exists under the hag's direct control. People just aren't aware of it. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's not wrong. Just because we don't know it exists doesn't mean it doesn't. I feel like those tips are pretty straightforward. I don't think I need to talk a ton about them. I mean, that one is basically just saying... I mean, it was pointing out, like this one pointed out that her father has a lot of knowledge and their connection is closer than might be expected, which is interesting, honestly. Pretty interesting to me. Maybe he's going to become involved at some point, is what I'm thinking right now. And obviously she mentions, like, you know, there could be a curse team, right? Curse execution team that's just unknown. Should be interesting. It's not impossible. I don't know. I haven't 100% decided if I believe the Sonozakis are in on it or not. I mean, it would make a lot of sense, and I wouldn't be shocked if they were. But I don't know. Part of me part of me feels like they might not be. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's crazy, but it feels crazy, but part of me really does believe that they might not be. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't have a better way to explain, like, Chapter 3. Well, no, but that doesn't, I think that's irrelevant, honestly. I don't think, like, I think they covered up Chapter 3, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the ones in charge of all the cases, like, or the murders. Was this typically? Oh, this one was just saying that basically no one would have that information except for you. Which, like, yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay, so I mean, this was quite an episode. Yeah, I was hoping for another banger after the last one, and I'd say it delivered for sure. So, I mean, in this episode, the big thing, like in this chapter specifically, the big thing was obviously Shion, like, she lost it, right? She's clearly the one, right, running around in Chapter 2 at this point. Which is interesting. I mean, I was right about that. I felt very strongly that this was the case, but it's nice to see it confirmed. But it's interesting to see the motives. I wasn't 100% sure what the reasoning would be, but it seemed to... It did basically just seem to be fear, right? That she was next, right? When Mion started to kind of interrogate her about Yashiro-sama being angry, right? It seemed like she thought that Mion knew that they went into the storehouse. I don't think she did, to be honest. Like, at first it seemed like she did, but then, I don't know, like, she was obviously surprised when it was mentioned that Tomitake and Takano went into the storehouse. So unless the only knowledge she had was that Keiichi and Shion went, then she literally might not have known, which is kind of interesting. So I think it was probably just like out of a fear reaction, but that fear controlled her and the demon finally took over, right? And now we're going to see over the next few days as things kind of scale out of control. Oryu's dead already, kind of on accident, but you know. Mion's locked in a cell. We're going to see a Kimiyoshi tomorrow, I assume, like in the next day in game. Then after that, we've got Rika and Satoko. And then after that is when they, like, kind of catch on to her, right? And confront her. And that's what I'm really interested in. How does the end of that play out? Because depending on how the end of that plays out, it might modify my theories about the curse or the demon, whatever, like how exactly it operates, how long it takes effect, right? What exactly is happening, right? And that's something that I definitely need to like focus on a little more. And I think getting a direct look at someone right like this and it being like very obvious that's the case is going to be probably the best chance to actually figure out what exactly is going on there, right? So I'm really excited to see that. But I mean, this episode was just crazy, man. Like, I mean, this episode was just Shion like finally snapping, right? Over, and it was all like connected to Satoshi still, like that being unresolved, which I mean, it all makes sense. None of this is actually too shocking, really. It was shocking to see, and there are still things that are not explained that I don't know the answers to, right? Like I've said this before, I don't know what that presence is, right? She felt the presence following her. It was stomping when they were in the storehouse. It seemed to be watching them torture Oryu's corpse, like whip it. I don't know. I have no clue what it could be. I mean, like, well, I say that. I mean, I could make guesses, right? My guess would be something like out of body, right? Some spirit like out of body. That's my best guess, like genuinely. It's like I said, it's like a synchronized thing. This can't just be a hallucination. It seemed like a synchronized hallucination. And at that point, I don't know, it might not be a hallucination at all, you know? That makes sense to me. And I've said that several times this episode, but that's really something I'm curious on, because it wasn't until this episode that I finally realized, wait a second, my explanation for this doesn't really fit, like, the details that we already had, right? And so I'm very curious to see where that's going to go. Like I said, I'm curious to see how it's going to play out with, like, the demon, because presumably there's going to be, like, I don't know, presumably we're going to get some new information on how that plays out, which should be interesting. But man, this was just another really good episode. Like, I mean, we're just in it, right? I feel like this chapter has been crazy for a while, but now we are in it, right? We've probably got another episode or two left in this chapter, which is, I mean, pretty exciting. Hopefully I'll be able to play again soon. I think that's basically going to wrap up this episode. I don't know. I don't know how much more I have to talk about. I felt like I talked a lot as things were happening in this episode, so I don't need to kind of talk about my thoughts as much after, you know, if that makes sense. A lot happened here, and I don't know. I definitely stopped at multiple points to talk about it. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I didn't really talk about much or that I need to talk about more, but nothing's really coming to mind right now. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything, so I'm not going to try to draw this out any longer. So that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really enjoyed this episode. This chapter, I think, is fantastic. So I hope you guys are enjoying it and looking forward to the next few episodes, however many there's going to be. I can't tell you exactly when they're going to come out, but hopefully they'll be soon because I want to keep playing. So whenever those episodes come out, I hope to see you guys there. Peace.